Welcome. It's Ari Rosenbaum with Vet 401k National Virtual Conference. This is the third annual edition. And of course, everybody's coming in now. I always like that whole Zoom thing. All of a sudden, that attendee list comes from 0 to 50, 60 in 30, 40 seconds. And before we start with our first presentation, I want to announce, we're doing virtual event here. Virtual event, you don't get any food, you don't get any stadium tour, you get no athlete appearance, but we will be live in Oakland, California. Yes, before the Oakland A's move to Las Vegas. We'll be there on April 14th, and we will be in Detroit, Motor City. I'll make some Detroit jokes. On May 3rd in June, we are looking at 1 to 2 events. It's just a matter of my guy Larry negotiating and whatnot. We do have a venue in New York that I wanted to hold an event there for years and years and years. They're just a little cocky. When it comes to getting business, they're not in a rush. So hopefully we'll be there in New York in June, as well as some other locations as well. But we will be in Oakland, we will be in Detroit, and I got to press on that New York place because I want to have that event in June back in New York. We haven't done a New York event since 2019 at MetLife Stadium, which of course is in New Jersey. But first things first, our first presenter, Lyle from Granite Group. He's been a big supporter of these from day 1 or day 2. Actually, day 3 was the Philly event all the way back there in 2018. I can't believe it's 5 years we've been doing this thing. And we're still doing this thing. So Lyle, take it away.
Thanks, Ari. I think it's been about 5 years since I've been tagging along with you. I want to thank everyone for attending today. I'm going to be quick. I like to be interactive. So I don't know, Ari, if you have the ability for people to ask questions, but I'd like to answer questions on the spot if that's possible.
They will have the opportunity. There is a Q&A as part of the webinar.
Okay.
And of course, there's always a chat as well if people are, just want to chat.
All right. So I want to have this as informative as possible. I'm here to help advisors. We partner with advisors at Grant Group. We started as a family office, and then about 10 years ago, an advisor came to me, or a client came to me and said he wanted me to do for his employees what I do for him privately inside the 401k. And then a few years later, an advisor asked me to do it, and here we are. Be his 338, and here we are. So I've turned it out to be something I would do to be nice, has actually turned out to be a pretty good business. So and so I'm just going to get right into it. But my purpose today is really to help out advisors really know what's going on in the business today from things I've read, because I know not everyone can see everything. I want you to know in part of the sales process what an advisor needs to say, because this is what plan sponsors are looking for. I'm going to give you a tool here that I'll show you that will help with what I believe to be the #1 need from a plan sponsor who's going to hire you, the employer, and give you some solutions and challenges and go there. But if you can bear with me, I'm going to get through this. All right, how long do I have, by the way?
You have until 11:30. If you go a minute over, I'm not going to shoot.
I'm going to gauge myself. So here's some stats. I do a lot of reading. I'm publishing on ERISA law. I'm actually going to be on Bloomberg on Monday at 11:10 Bloomberg Radio, because I have a face for radio. And so so I just want to, so I do a lot of reading on things, and I'm pretty up on as much stuff as I can. But this one came from Fidelity. 47% of all employers report that they're going to consider a new advisor. That's a big jump. That's an all-time high. It's usually around in the 25 to 30% range. And the reasons are really, they want their advisors to be proactive. They want they want better fund lineups. They want more engagement. They're really, it's no longer, sell the plan, put it on a platform and move and walk away. The advisors are going to have to do a little bit more work going forward. Plan sponsors they're just, 51%, this is from another survey, uh, they're looking for a proactive program to increase plan performance. We're not talking about investments. They're talking about ancillary things like we want to increase plan participation in contribution rates and things like that. They need help doing that. So we have a program for that as well. They really want to take the liability off of them. 49% just don't want to have anything to do with monitoring investments. And 44%, this was sort of unusual because I thought for years people just didn't care. That's why everyone went into a target date fund. But now, I guess with the market volatility and what's happened here in the last year, and I don't personally, as a guy who manages a family office, I think there's some downside ahead of coming ahead, even though the markets are up nicely so far this year. But a lot of participants want market information. They want to understand what's going on. And that's a huge difference from what it was a few years ago. So, and if you have any questions, just shoot them out. So employers, and we all read this in the news, they're having a hard time. And so I'm going to give you some notes, on this, but they're just having a hard time attracting and maintaining clients. That's what they need. They want to outsource that liability. They want simplicity on managing the plan. They do not want to go into meetings as much. They do not, 401ks are the redheaded stepchild. So until they get a lawsuit across their desk, and all of a sudden they're not. So that's why the case is for proactive advisors. The robo-advising, the betterments, and all those guys, I think, are dead because people now want service. And the only one that's going to be able to service them is the advisor, right? It's just that simple. So as long as you have a good system, you got a good CRM system, if you're Redtail or a HubSpot or whatever, you really need to have those types of systems stay, hyper organized to get out there. So some of the things that I wanted to touch on when you look about what the employer wants is that they want things really simple. So when you're talking to employers, or more importantly, the employee, you want to make things really simple. You got to have really targeted messaging and really understand who you're talking to. So if someone's over 50, what about the new catch-up stuff? It's now $30,000 a year for a catch-up. And if you're an owner, and Ari, correct me if I'm wrong, I think if you're an owner, you make over 145,000, you can actually put an additional 10,000 on top of everything else, is what I read recently on the new rule. And I think just because of the market volatility, more people are really starting to pay attention. You got a huge demographic here. You got, baby boomers are basically 65 to 73. They're all starting to really retire in earnest now, and they're looking for help. So, and it's up to really the advisor to really get in there and be proactive with them and ask them. Messages must be really simple when you're talking to people. You got to think about when you're talking, you think you're going to talk to a high school graduate with no knowledge or information. So what I did is I practiced on my kids. And if I could get them to understand it, then I think we're on the right track. So you have to think about that. I had an HR director one time tell me, please don't use the word terms of equities and fixed income, because employees did not know what that meant. Just so you understand where I'm coming. That's probably the best example. It's shocking to me, but the people on this call, it's not shocking to, but for everyone else, it's they just don't know. And the best thing you really need to leverage, because we live in live in this world, is technology. There's lots of things you guys can do to really make a difference, to make your lives easier and stay in front. It's really important to stay in front of not only the employer who's going to hire you, but the employees, because they give feedback to the employer. So so I want to give you some things. They want the fiduciary protection. They want the best investments at the lowest price. And by the way, the best investments at the lowest price are not sometimes, depending on the sector, are not index funds. And if anyone ever wanted to have a conversation, that you got to just reach out to me, and I can give you all the analytics you want to prove that out. And they want, with that one statistic, with 44% looking for education, they need investment education. There's retirement education, which the record keepers do pretty well. Put away $500 a month or per paycheck, but there's no help on where to put it. And you think about pragmatically, how do you help a firm with 250 employees? You just don't have the time to call 250 employees. So there's got to be solutions out there. I'm going to send you one. So this might be a little bit redundant, but I always feel like people don't really understand, or, plan sponsors don't. This is just a graph that I give to plan sponsors. Say, what would you like? Here's a 321, you're going to share in the liability. And here's a 338, and you're going to, take 5 or 10% of the liability. There's always going to be a little liability because the employer makes a decision to discharge the investment fiduciary responsibility to the 338. So, but it's the majority of it. So so you have to explain, because they don't know. And when you go in to sell them something, they don't even know if they're who they've hired, a 321 or a 338, or if there's even a fiduciary on it, because they think the advisor is automatically that person. Well, that, depending on who you are, what you do for a living, or how you want to structure that, you got to make it very clear, right? So a lot of times, and I help advisors on this all the time, every time there's always 2 or 3 large cap growth or 2 or 3 large value in a fund lineup. There's no way the average person who doesn't understand what the words equity means is going to decipher between which is best. This is an opportunity on how to sell. You want to simplify it. You want to have one large, you want to have one mutual fund per asset class. It's very important, so that employee, if he decides to do his own allocation, at least he'll be diversified. Can you imagine the guy who chose 3 large cap growth funds at the end of 21? He was blown up last year. He was down 30 to 40% last year. So, you got to think about things. And if you need help, I have analytics that will prove it. There's no opinion. It's just a matter of fact, right? So we use Zephyr Analytics. We spend about 40 or 50 grand a year on just that one thing, the analytics. So we're pretty adept at this. And what we learned over time is that people really did not know how to allocate. So everyone came up with target date funds, which is great, right? It serves a purpose. They're not very efficient, and the returns are not that great, but it does serve a purpose to help out people who can't make an allocation. But but that's a one size fit all approach. So what we did, and we think is a much better model, is that we came up with, we now moved everything over into CIT so they can go anywhere. But we have CITs that are made up of the fund lineups. So it's really easier. So, but we learned, so that way they don't have to allocate, they just put it in and then we actually manage it. It's called Manage Money. If you're not familiar with it, you really should call, because that's where I think the future of the business is going to be. And so, but what we learned is that people couldn't even decipher between 5 different models. They still didn't know which was right. So what we do, and I'm going to put up my chart here for advisors. I've got Ari Rosenbaum Law Firm. He's an advisor, right? He's not an advisor. I'm just going to pretend, but we're going to pretend he's an advisor. And Ari, usually I put the client's name up here, the company's name, and then I put Ari over here under the contact us. There's pictures. There's the handsome devil there himself, and imagine that someone's up late at night and they want a question, so they just go right here, click on the profile, click on the envelope, and out pops an email to Ari, right? And then he sends it, and Ari will call him back the next day. That's employee engagement. That is what employers are looking for. Okay, it's very important. This site is password protected. We create a site for each individual plan that we're 338 on. So, and you download these things, right? You save them to your home screen, and it looks and feels like an app. It's a great thing. It's really pretty cool. We've actually won an award on this a while back. But the big thing here is launching a questionnaire. So if you're an employee, and this is how you want to engage very efficiently, is that you launch the questionnaire. And I apologize, it's usually lickety split, but you want to send this out prior to an enrollment meeting. You want to get them to download this, get them to take the quiz before they come. I'm just going to randomly select these things. Whoops, I skipped one because I read so fast. And then you get a score. You get the score up. We're in aggressive balance. Notice I use the word stocks and bonds as the feedback. I actually listen to clients and advisors. So when they tell me something, and because we own the site and we fabricated this thing from scratch, we can change it pretty lickety split. So 80-20, so they're in the 80-20. So if they're going to do their own allocation, at least it gives them some guide of what they, where they should be. But what we do what we do very differently for everybody is that we list all the funds and the models on the CITs from least aggressive to most aggressive. Some record keepers do it by sector, some do it by alphabetical order. It really doesn't make sense. No one knows the difference between an international and emerging markets fund. They really don't. They think it's just all international. So we just put it out here to so risk is just, we always find that risk is more important out there. And that's customized for whoever, for the fund lineup. So not all fund lineups are the same. If you want to learn, if you want to go in, you can learn a little bit more about the aggressive balanced fund and read a little bit about that. And if you like it, because this is password protected by plan, it automatically defaults to whomever the record keeper is. So if you're in Fidelity, it goes to Fidelity. If it goes to Empower or Principal or TIA or whomever, we can play on any record keeper out there. It doesn't matter to us. What they do is they just log on, click here, and they go right into whoever the record keeper is. They buy the CIT if that's what they choose to do and log off. And what we just delivered is a personal allocation to that with managed money. It's not only getting that personal allocation, now it's just managed for them too, virtually for almost nothing. That's it. There's no more professional money managers, and I'm going to show you some fees and things, how they compare. It's a big deal. It saves a lot of money. We end up saving, after everything is done down with an advisor and everything else, we end up saving with comparable services almost 50-60 basis points a year to the plan. That's a big deal. The other thing we do that's pretty nifty that really gets it, so we'll say some things like, so in December of 21, we told everyone to sell bonds, and we sent it out to the advisors, we sent it out to the plan sponsors, and it's up to you guys to follow up and make sure they see it. But it was a good thing, because we all know what happened to the bond market. It was the worst bond market in history. It was last year. So so we devise all kinds of things. We have quarterly quarterly education. We look, here's something on the model portfolios. We have quarterly commentaries. This is the same quarterly commentaries that go to our private clients as well. If you ever have an interest in learning about our private client business, a private client to me is an endowment, a foundation, or a family, by the way. That's a private client. And we have a bit higher minimums for that stuff. Special announcements, all this kind of good stuff. So I'm a regular on Bloomberg. Here's my latest Bloomberg. It's all up there for the grabs. It makes it very, very interactive. So you're always staying in front of the employee and the employer. They love this. And if you notice right here, the only thing that says Granite Group up here is this. Our Powered by Granite Group. This is really white labeled for the advisor to help the advisor out. It's a pretty nifty device that allows allows the advisor to really interact and do a great job with it. And the employers love it. And if they love it, you stay hired. So that's about it. Is there any questions out there, Ari? Because I can't see if there's one question. I see a question. Will copies of the president be made available? Sure. I'll send it to Gavin. You want to just send me your thing? That'd be fine. So we just did that. So in the end result, and everyone's always looking for this, but this is this is an example of a client. It's, we increase participation and increase contribution rates. It doesn't happen in 1 year. It takes a little bit of work, but that's what the employer wants. But this tool makes it really easy. So this is a typical client of ours. After 3 or 4 years, most of our plans are between 85 and 90% participated, and we always have increase in contribution rates. It's it's really important to do that. You got to be somewhat paternalistic. So we also offer a PEP. So this, what I was talking about, it's either for a standalone plan or a PEP. But we have our own PEP, and so I decided to just give you an example of a $3 million plan. I personally think, and a lot of people are going to disagree with this, that PEPs are really good for the smaller company that has under 100 employees, where or if you especially if there's a company with 10, 20, 30 employees where there is no HR person, right? It's usually the CFO, CEO, or an owner, and they do not want to deal with managing the plan. So with a PEP, the only difference is that instead, in addition to being a 338 in the management models and having the device, with a PEP you have we're a 316. So we actually will sign the 5500. So this is really simple. And the way what we do for the advisors is that the agreement goes to the plan sponsor, and the plan sponsor and the advisor negotiate what the advisor's fee is, and the plan sponsor dictates it. So it's not like a product where you get an automatic 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 basis points, whatever you're going to charge. It's a negotiated fee between you and your client, and it's pretty nifty. And so it really doesn't need to be approved by really any compliance, because the plan sponsor is still paying you directly. So I gave an example here of $3 million plan. So allocation miles, depending, Stadium has custom miles at 35 basis points, other people charging 20 bips. Personalized service, it was really Financial Engines I was looking at, 50 to 60 bips for that stuff. That's really where the advisor comes in. I don't know of anyone that has an investment education site. The retirement education's out there. It's really sort of commoditized, but the investment education to what we do, how we do it, I don't see anyone doing that. Of course, with the fiduciary. So if you add up all those services, we're being a little bit conservative. If someone did an a la carte service, it's 100 basis points. And in our PEP, for a $3 million plan, we're just charging 20 bips. That's it. And it leaves a lot of room for the advisor to charge whatever they want to charge. So, and everything's done for you, right? There's really nothing to do. And we really just work hand in hand with the advisor. So it's just more engagement, increase operational protection, increase investment protection, no 5500 and managed models, all wrapped up. That is, that's cheap. And then what happens is the advisor can do whatever they want right over here. You put in 10 or 50 basis points. It doesn't matter to me if it's a standalone plan or in our PEP. It's really up to you. So these are pretty inexpensive ways to interact with the employer and employees to make your business efficient. Because listen, you got to be pragmatic. I used to be a broker a couple millenniums ago, and the reality is that it's hard to scale, and you got to think of your business as a business. Do you really want to take a startup plan? I would absolutely encourage you to walk away. I know this promise they're going to do all this thing. Unless the guy's a private client that has a few million with you, you really just need to walk away from it. There's no break even on those, right? You just walk away. And really, if anyone really needs help out there in making decisions, we've become pretty proficient at this. So if you need help with figuring out a model or a plan or something, get that 408B2. It's a fee disclosure agreement. Send it to me, talk to me, or my partner, or I have a whole staff that does this, and we can help you out, and we'll help you close it. I'll tell you this. I had a few advisors last year ask me to do the presentation for them. That's partnering. That's my idea of partnering. And I got on, did the entire presentation. I was asked 15 times last year. 11 out of the 15, we closed them on the first call. The other 4, we closed on the second call. So it's it works. So if you really are serious, you ask Ari or anybody in the industry, I am stupidly honest. I don't, we've got the advisors back. So we have a little over $1 billion under management. Probably going to go a lot higher this year. We have some things cooking. We won awards. We're published in ERISA law journals. We're on Bloomberg. You guys have access to all of it. We're just a gigantic resource for you guys. And you just have to think about being in the business of being in the business, right? Think about scale, think about simplicity. I think, once people see this, fees become consequential, even though I've already been told by what's those guys, RFP PEP, whatever it is, I have the least expensive PEP with the most services, whatever they told me I had. So I just want to give you a schematic, make this easy. See, we're just over here. We just talk to you guys and we just make changes, whether it's in the plan as the 338, but it's really between you and the employer. We have the supervisor over here. We got the confused employer over here that really just relies on the advisor. It's really between you, and then you guys have, access to all, the app, and we're just in the background and really talking to you. If you ever want us to talk to the employer, we'd be happy to do so. You just have to ask it. We don't talk to the clients. That's yours. So what's happening here is the metamorphosis is happened with technology. There's all kinds of ways to do business if you're going to be in the 401k business. But if you look at this, we're 100% supportive of you guys, and we can really play on any record keeper. But the traditional way of offering plans, those days are over, absolutely over. So you got to be creative, innovative, think of new ways to attract business. I've got lots of ideas on how to do that. I'm going to leave you I've said these questions before, but when you're selling, you want to ask questions that they say yes to. So when you ask for the meeting, they say yes. It's a part of the natural flow, right? Do you want less responsibility? You have to, yes. Do you want less operational for that responsibility? Yes, of course they do. Do you need help attracting employees? Of course they do. They're going to say yes. So then you just say, would 4 o'clock on Friday be good? And if you want to invite me in, to help you sell it, I'm pretty good at it. So I've become pretty profound. My only challenge, you guys, if you just give me a call, if you have a prospect, let me come in, I can analyze it, let me help you close them, and we just move on. So, so you guys can spend your time doing what's important, whether you're the soccer coach or go get the next appointment, whatever is going on. So here's my contact info right here. It's time to, I will tell you this, the advisors who do not adapt will lose their plans, because I'm going to partner with somebody. There's an advisor going to call me up and we're going to take it. So it's time to really think a little bit differently how you approach your own business, whatever that looks like. And I can help you do it, because I started my business from scratch 20 years ago, really as a family office. It was tough. So I would hope you would call me so you don't make the same mistakes I did 20 years ago. It was tough, but it's also very, very gratifying. So if there's any questions out there, this would be a great time to ask away. Any questions out there, Ari?
There was a question again about the presentations being available. You can reach out to Lyle. If you don't have his email address, you can reach out to me, and that's really,
Yeah. Well, I'll send a follow-up email to everybody to say, hi, here I am. Here's my contact info. Okay, something like that. All right. So if you need anything, let me know. And I'm going to turn it. Oh, is there another question?
Is there a large plan audit charge?
So if you're referring to the PEP, there's not, because what I'm doing is I'm not accepting any plans with over 100 employees. Because the current rule right now is if you have over 100 employees, it will subject everybody every participating employer to an audit fee. We don't want to do that. And so I actually try to get audit fees from auditor, because no one's really done it before. And the auditors came back to me and says, actually a great question. They have to audit each plan within PEP, which defeats the purpose. So that's the way these audits, it has nothing to do with the DOL. It's just, that's a part of it. There is legislation out there that hopefully it gets passed one day, that they will start only looking at participating employers and not all the employers. So if you have a plan of 250 people and only 50 people are participating, that plan usually is subject to an audit, but hopefully that will change down the road. And so if we get to close to 1,000, I usually stop and I'll just open up another PEP as well. So just to keep the cost low for the employer. It was a very good question.
Yeah, for the PEP, the 1,000 participants does put you into an audit.
Yeah, but Ari, I think what I've read, they're thinking about increasing that number. And I
Yeah, I
think,
mean, there talks about it, but I don't know if that, to me, I'm always under the belief until I see it, see it, it's a sign into law. I don't bother with it. So it's like,
agreed.
that's how it was with Secure 2.0. The first time I wrote about Secure 2.0 it was already law,
Yeah. There's a lot of good new information. So 403Bs can now be put inside PEPs and all that other good stuff. So they're almost like they're really identical. Lots of good information. So if you guys need any help on the Secure Act 2.0, I've got, I'm pretty well versed on it.
Yeah, and of course I'm presenting about it.
Oh, you are. So then you don't need me. You just need Ari.
Always, there's always different views and all that kind of stuff, because whatever. And
Okay. Well, thank you for your time. Thanks, Ari.
Are there any additional costs for new comparability plans? They still do that? People, I don't think.
I don't think so. I think that's really a record keeper decision.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a record keeping fee.
That's not for me. Our fees are our fees regardless of the plan. We also manage pensions and things like that directly as well. And we do have a
And-
system. Yeah.
Yeah, and what about a PEP with all large plans in it?
Well,
You
that's
wouldn't want
a
to.
question. So if you have that's an excellent question. So if you have a large PEP, so if you look at, if you have those plans, when I was talking to auditors, they really need to have almost the same type of setup and the same rules, the same, requirements, vesting schedules and everything. If they don't, it's going to require a separate audit, within the pooled and plan. That's what I read. That's what I was told. I mean, I'm not professed to be knowledgeable about that, but it's still the same thing. They're still going to have an audit. It might be reduced because there might be 5 large plans and the guy gets 5 new cases all at once, but it's tough, to do that. I think, with really large plans, I think they're better off being a standalone personally, because there's a lot more customization you can do. So
I absolutely agree.
yeah, there's one last thing. We do have a process. We had a client that had about 50 million in a 401k and 50 million in a profit sharing, and we devised a way. Not too many record keepers and custodians can do this, but we devised a way for the employee to see their profit sharing and their 401k on the record keeper's statement. Just so you know, it's a lot. It's work, but we figured it out and it works. So for those people that have those types of needs. Okay. Thank you, Ari.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
You
you.
got it. Next is Bill Shores. I've known Bill quite some time, back when I was a lowly ERISA attorney at Geller Group. Love Bill, fellow Mets fan. And when I talk about that 401k conference and coming up with the idea about it, Bill was one of the 2 providers and said, "Oh, that's not such a bad idea. Let me go in with it." And Bill was a part of the very first event that we did in June 2018. I can't believe it's almost 5 years, with Doc Gooden as the first guest. And we learned from there that we cannot have Larry mention that their guest is there before lunch, because everybody will leave. And so, the first event you run, you got to work out the kinks and all that stuff. But and then Bill was part of MetLife, and Bill, take it away.
All right, thanks, Ari. And I can't, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear
Okay,
you.
good. All right. I don't want to go forward without knowing what jersey you're wearing.
I'm going with the San Jose Sharks reverse retro, which pays homage to the long ago Oakland Golden, the Golden Seals, the California Golden Seals.
Yep. All right, cool. I'm just trying to align my
Okay.
my
The
Zoom here, so
slideshow part, start from the slideshow beginning, as it always annoys.
yeah, that's what I'm doing. I just had to move my toolbar here. So
yeah.
All right, so everybody can let me just know if I'm good visually, that the presentation is up.
Yeah, I
Looks
see
good?
it.
All right,
Yep.
Excellent. All right, so just to answer the question that is bound to come up, yes, these slides will be available. I'll email them out to Ari right after we wrap up here. So good morning, everybody. My name is Bill Shores. I am the National Sales Director for DCIO over at Invesco. I had spent the first 20 plus years of my career in the 401k space with a Japanese bank that no longer exists, and then on to Oppenheimer Funds in 1999, and then Invesco acquired us back in 2019. So coming up on 4 years with the combined organization at Invesco. I oversee a team of 9 senior retirement consultants that work with advisors around the country. And as I already said, our relationship goes back close to 20 years. So very happy to be here. For those of you that haven't been paying attention to the litigation space in retirement plans, it seems that the plaintiffs' bar has identified ERISA as a growth sector. The lawsuits just keep coming, and there's literally no place to hide anymore. No matter what you do, you could be subject to litigation. So, we came up with this presentation a while back just to say, okay, how do we help our advisors protect their clients? And you've all heard the saying, the best defense is a good offense. You've also heard the best offense is a good defense sometimes. But, in football, the prevent defense doesn't always work. More often than not, it doesn't. And what I've noticed with this rise in litigation is a lot of advisors have started to operate their plans in conjunction with their plan sponsors so they don't get sued. And what that means is, they get too defensive. They start taking measures that aren't necessarily in the best interest of the participants because they're doing everything to stay out of the litigation crosshairs. And if you're running a plan not to get sued, that doesn't always align with what's best for the participants. So we'll go through some of that here, but what we're going to do is go through what's been going on. What are some of the tactics you can use in terms of, plan sponsor education, things you can work with your auditors, and different tactics you can take, and what is the litigation really focusing on? So with that, let's see if these slides advance here. So basics of ERISA fiduciary duty. So let's just take a look at the basics. This slide is very busy, so I'm going to condense it, really only talk about, a couple of these things, because over on the left, you see exclusive purpose and avoid conflict of interest. And those two kind of overlap. If you're operating in the exclusive benefit of the plan and the participants, you're typically going to avoid conflicts of interest. But first and foremost, the employer has to realize they're wearing two hats. The employer is always going to be looking to do what's in the best interest of the employer, but they also have to, in their role as fiduciaries, do what's in the best interest of the plan and the participants. So it's okay to wear two hats, you just can't wear them at the same time. They have to really segregate their employer duties from their fiduciary duties. Prudence, we all know, act with the care, skill, and prudence and diligence of a prudent person. Follow plan documents. Obviously, the biggest issue we see there is, compensation issues, adhering to the terms of the document. I know a certain ERISA attorney based in Garden City that will do a plan checkup, to go over the documents and look at the plan and make sure everything's running accordingly. So not a bad idea to have a plan checkup run by a certain ERISA attorney who might be hosting this call. So definitely reach out to Ari for that. Always a good, way to just make sure everything, all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. So avoid conflicts of interest, follow your plan documents, make sure you're doing everything for the exclusive purpose of the employees, diversify the investments, and act with care and prudence. So what happens is the courts, we're seeing aren't really looking at the outcomes. They're more looking at the process. So you have to document the process. If it's not documented, it didn't happen technically. So they're always going to be looking at the process. Sometimes they do look at the outcome. The outcome can be so egregiously bad that the process is going to get called into question. But it's not strictly, when it goes to the courts, it's not a 20/20, hindsight game where, hey, this fund outperformed. You should have known that ahead of time. So the courts are starting to throw cases out that don't meet a certain threshold for this type of stuff, if the employer, if the plan sponsor is showing that they have a documented process in place. So another thing that we see is a lot of plan sponsors, a lot of advisors, when they look at their fiduciary duty for selection and monitoring, this is all they focus on. Let's benchmark the record keeper fees and make sure our record keeping fees are in order. And let's, look at the funds. So you always hear to the 3 F's: funds, fees, fiduciary. And this is all they tend to focus on. However, there are lawsuits and there has been litigation around other aspects of the plan and different service providers. So you always have to remember that any added services that you have for your plan are subject to the same level of fiduciary duty to monitor and ensure that the fees are reasonable. So some examples of those are managed accounts. If you're using managed accounts, there's a very large record keeper that has what's called the dynamic QDIA. You go into a target date fund at a certain age, you automatically transfer into a managed account unless you opt out. Have you done any due diligence? Have you, compared the fees for their managed account versus others? Are they reasonable? That's part of your fiduciary duty. That's a service that's being offered to the plan participants. We need to make sure that the fees are in line and reasonable. Self-directed brokerage accounts. We see those, in a lot of plans, especially medical practices, law firms. Are the fees reasonable for that? That has to be documented and benchmarked. Something like an auto IRA cash out provider. We see those coming to the forefront now to get rid of low balance participants, to help, ease the burden of plan sponsors of having to keep track of terminated employees. So you do have to monitor and review and benchmark the fees for those services. So it's not just looking at the record keeping and the investments any longer. You have to benchmark and review and document that you've done due diligence on all the fees. So when service providers change, new fiduciary due diligence should be conducted. We see that a lot. There's been a lot of merger and acquisition activity. As an example, Empower, acquired Mass Mutual and Prudential. The Standard just acquired Securian. Ascensus acquired Newport. If you would have your plan with Securian, and the Standard bought Securian's record keeping system, just because the Standard wrote the largest check doesn't make them a good provider. You have to show due diligence, and I'm sure they're an excellent provider, but that you still have to undergo a fiduciary review of your record keeping selection. The decision to select the Standard as a record keeper, the decision to select Securian as a record keeper was a fiduciary decision. If Standard goes in and acquires Securian, you have to show that you're making a fiduciary decision to either go to the Standard or to look at other options and go elsewhere. So if your vendor is acquired, it triggers a fiduciary process. You just can't say, well, they got sold, this is where we're going. So always make sure that if there's acquisitions amongst your service providers, that it triggers a fiduciary review, of due diligence, benchmarking, request for proposals to ensure that the place you're going isn't just because, that's where you got sold to. It has to be the best out there. So let's look at some of the court cases that have been going on. There's hundreds of them. So just a couple of examples here. And what's interesting, some of them do conflict, depending on the court and the jurisdiction. So Hughes versus Northwestern, this was in 2021. And this really focused in on the duty of prudence. It means you have to continually monitor. Northwestern made the case that, hey, we have 400 investment options. We're not reviewing all of them all the time because we have 400. It would be too much of a burden. And of the 400, there's some really good ones. So if we have some bad ones, that's okay, because the participants always have some good ones to go to amongst the 400. That didn't stand up. Just because you have 400 funds, and that's another reason why you don't want to have 400 funds in your plan, is the fiduciary burden of that, is you have to continuously monitor all investments that are offered in the plan, not just once, hey, they look good today, 5 years from now, well, we have so many other options, it's okay. What's interesting is there was a court case a few years prior, Hecker versus Deere, where it was the exact opposite. There were proprietary funds from the record keeper in there, and the plaintiffs bar sued, and the defense was, well, if they don't want to use the proprietary, there's plenty of other options available through the self-directed brokerage account. So you have one case saying, too many funds alleviates the proprietary issue, another case saying too many funds doesn't alleviate the duty to monitor and review. So it depends really on the courts and where you are. And the law firms that are doing this, the plaintiffs bar, and there's a few of them. If you follow, the trade publications, you'll see the same firms come up over and over. You have, Schlichter is the most prominent one, Jeremy Schlichter. You have Capozzi Adler. And a lot of them, not necessarily with those firms, are cut and paste. They just take one lawsuit, cut and paste, change the name, change the dollar amounts, and they look almost identical. And there's been this whole rise of litigation. And I equivocated to Willie Sutton. And if you're not sure who Willie Sutton is, he was an infamous bank robber in the 20s and early 30s. And when he got caught, they asked him, why are you robbing the banks? Why did you keep doing this? And his answer was simple. That's where the money is. And this is why the plaintiffs bars are filing these lawsuits in the qualified plan space, because there's $10 trillion in defined contribution assets within the United States retirement system. So they're targeting it. They're going after a lot of nonprofits, because 403Bs are generally governed by committees and board of trustees that don't work there. So there's not as much of a focus. So you see a lot of the lawsuits are around universities, around healthcare systems, but they're really, there's no guardrails anymore. They're going after anybody and everyone. And a lot of this has gotten out of control, in my view. It's actually, I think, doing more harm than good now. Obviously litigation, shines a light on some bad apples, and that's great. But now we've gotten to the point where it's just class action after class action, and it's obvious, it's just, hoping to play the settlement game, go to discovery and then play for a settlement. So that's what went on in a lot of these cases here. So one of the more interesting cases, though, it was Barnett versus Alight. It really brought cybersecurity to the forefront of fiduciary duties. That's not something a lot of fiduciaries or financial advisors would think of in monitoring and servicing a 401k plan. That cybersecurity is now a fiduciary duty that has to be documented, and that you show you have a process, and that you've interviewed and documented your cyber policies from your various vendors. And then this case was one of the best ones out there, because I call this one the kitchen sink. Reichert basically threw everything and anything against the wall against Juniper Networks. In this case, settled at the end of November for $3 million. Juniper settled, obviously before going to trial. So, they threw 5 different things at them. No RFP. You haven't compared record keeping fees in years. You didn't consider index funds over actively managed. This is one of my all-time favorites. We'll go over that. You didn't use revenue sharing. This one really was surprising, because we've seen litigation for using revenue sharing. In this case, they got sued for not using revenue sharing. So talk about no place to hide. We know index funds aren't safe. You saw BlackRock, be named in a suit for the BlackRock index target date funds. People were getting sued for using index funds. So really, no matter what you do, there's really no place to hide anymore. These law firms go through the 5500s on the Department of Labor website, and they have key indicators that they look for as red flags, as potential litigation targets. So we'll talk about something you can do there as well. Item 3 in the Juniper case, managed accounts, not offering sufficient value to offset the fees, failure to disclose fees properly, 404A5, and then failure to monitor, the fiduciaries, on the plan. So here's what happened with the revenue sharing in this case. So I deleted the names of the funds just because Invesco's compliance wanted me to. I know the funds that were involved, because if you go to the case, they're listed in the body of the lawsuit. But let's just call it Fund A, small cap value. And if you look at the Class A shares, the expense ratio is 1.13. If you look at the R6, the expense ratio is 0.79, where it says total expense ratio. So, for the most people, no brainer. Let's just go with 79 basis points. That's cheaper than 113. But when you're dealing with a record keeper that can collect revenue sharing and rebate it back to the participant that was in that fund, not rebate it to all participants, but to basically collect the fee and give it right back to the person that was in that fund. And this is typically done on a quarterly basis. So in this case, you had 1.13 as a total expense ratio, but a Class A share, in most cases, it varies by fund family. So I want to make sure I, put that disclaimer out there. But a Class A share will typically have a 25 basis point 12B1 fee and an additional 25 basis points of what's typically referred to as a sub-TA fee or sub-transfer agency fee. That will show up in the great category of other in the prospectus. You'll have management fee, 12B1 fee, other. And that's usually sub-TA fees that go to the record keeper in this case. So the record keeper collects the 12B1, the record keeper collects the sub-TA, they rebate it right back to the participant, and then your 113 becomes 63. So 113 net out 50, your A share is now cheaper than your R6. And this is the case with a lot of different fund families. So you can have most efficient share class, in this case, the A share, be cheaper than the lowest cost share class by prospectus, which the R6 is 79. So in this case, Juniper was litigated against for not using revenue sharing effectively. Now, if the record keeper is keeping the revenue sharing and offsetting their fees and saying, hey, your plan is free, that's another story. And we see that on the smaller end of the market where you ask plan sponsors, how much are you paying for your plan? Oh, I'm not paying anything. My plan's free. Well, if your plan is free, you're probably paying too much. There's no such thing as a nonprofit in the 401k sector or the financial services industry. So if your clients aren't getting billed by the record keeper because they're just collecting the revenue, the question to them is, how much do you need? Whatever you need, keep that and give us back the rest, and then we'll allocate it to participants. We'll pay for other plan services. So that's critical. That's where revenue sharing can get you in trouble as the plan continues to grow. The record keeper just keeps collecting more and more revenue. So in this case, this is gross to net pricing, most efficient share class. Then we go on to the other part where the law firm said, hey, this plan didn't consider index funds. Look at the small value, 79 basis points, the small mid value. Well, they could have gone to an index fund for 7 basis points. The World Large Stock Blend Fund, 42, they could have gotten it for 8, and so on. What they didn't do is, after they showed the cost of differentials of all of that, this was a very large plan, over $1 billion. They said, not using index funds cumulatively cost the plan participants $21 million. And they just put the dollars behind the cost differential shown on this slide. But we all know the object of the game isn't he or she who pays the least. The object of the game is he or she who retires with the most. What the lawsuit conveniently failed to include was that in 3 of the 5 cases here of these categories, the active fund outperformed the passive. So even with the higher expense ratio, active management outperformed the index. And that was just for informational purposes. It was in the emerging markets fund, in the world large stock, and in the small mid value that the active funds significantly outperformed, especially in the emerging market category, outperformed the index. But we're just trying to file a court case with the judge, hoping it doesn't get dismissed. Look, these people were harmed by $21 million. How can you dismiss this? So again, conveniently neglected to include that portion into the lawsuit. So, as you go through what you can be doing, we have a checklist of 35 different items, and I'm not going to go through all 35. And on the PowerPoint slides, we abbreviated that. But what you should do, conduct annual fiduciary training. This is critical. You can have people on the committee that don't know what a fiduciary is, have never been trained about what it means to be a fiduciary. So make sure you do annual fiduciary training and document that you did. Carefully craft fiduciary minutes. You want to be careful here. Don't include names. So for example, if you're working with a large plan and they have an investment committee or a fiduciary committee, and you're taking the minutes or somebody else is taking the minutes, and Mary Jane asks a question, you don't want to put in the minutes, on January 26th, committee meeting, Mary Jane asked the following question. Well, if there's litigation 3 years from now in 2026 and discovery happens and they go through the minutes, guess who's getting called to the stand? Mary Jane. You're putting a target on that person's back. Mary Jane, I see you asked this question on January 26th of 2023. We're now 3 years later. Who's going to remember? So you want to craft your minutes carefully. Committee members ask the following questions. Don't be too specific in there. So it's sort of like an investment policy statement. You want to be general and not too specific where you back yourself into a corner with the minutes. Just document, the spirit of the meeting, what topics were covered, but without you naming specific people. Conduct vendor searches periodically, benchmark fees every 2 years. So make sure you have a process that you do that, and that's documented. This is a good one. Not a lot of people do this, but this will keep the litigators at bay because they troll the 5,500 filings. So a fiduciary detail paragraph in the audit. Have your auditors add a fiduciary detail file in their audit of the plan description. Plan committee conducted an RFP, in 2021. Investment reviews were conducted, quarterly this year. Use of revenue sharing being rebated back to participants. Just have that in there, because when they go through the 5,500 filings and they see a share class that provides revenue sharing, that caution flag goes up for the litigators to target them. But if they continue to go through the audit and see, oh, revenue sharing is being used to do this, okay, they have their act together. Or benchmarking, oh, they did an RFP and benchmark plans last year, okay, we see that, we're going to back away. So that's a great, easy way to have the auditors add a fiduciary detail file to the plan audit when these litigators are trolling the 5,500. Continuing on, document fund structure rationale. Are you using a through glide path or a to glide path? What was your rationale? Because the conservative target date funds didn't show well until earlier this year. Earlier last year when the market started to decline. Why did you choose a more conservative glide path? Because Morningstar doesn't differentiate when they come out with the percentile rankings. Large cap value, are you deep value? Are you dividend focused? Are you traditional value? Significant differences in the same category. Active and passive, why are you going passive? Why are you choosing active? Showing you had a rationale and a process in that area. That you continually monitor the fund, not only for performance, but to make sure that the most efficient wrapper or vehicle is available. So let's just say you had Invesco Comstock, which is a large value fund, and you picked that fund, 5 years ago, and you're using the R6 share class. Is that still the best offering from Invesco? Does the Y share, which rebates 25, net out lower? Should we consider it? Is there a CIT available now? These things change, they're fluid. Asset managers release new share classes, they release new versions of CITs. So just because it was the best and cheapest vehicle 5 years ago, you have to go back to the asset managers. Hey, it's like a cell phone. Are you offering a better calling plan? They typically give the best calling plans to the new customers. You want to make sure that you have the best calling plan. Create credit revenue sharing back to participants, if whenever you can. Have the employer pay the fees whenever possible. It's a tax write-off, they get a deduction. There's all sorts of tax credits now. And any fees that aren't being deducted from plan assets or charged to the participants reduces potential harm. It eliminates the litigation risk because it's not impacting plan participants. So whenever possible, have the plan sponsor pay the fees there. So conduct periodic compliance reviews of plan operation, especially around compensation. I mentioned that earlier. That's where a lot of plans get into trouble. And start including cybersecurity in your fiduciary review process. So I'll stop there. I'm happy to take any questions. I think I have a minute or two left. So Ari, anything else you want me to cover or address? I'm happy to do so. And thank you for the opportunity and great seeing everybody.
Yeah, how do you think the Mets are going to do this year? That's really the question of the day. I mean, I really don't care anything else. I mean,
I can't hear you. Say that again.
How are the Mets going to do this year? That's all that matters, really.
The Mets are going to have a repeat of this past year, where they'll win 97 to 102 games and then flop in the playoffs.
Oh, geez. Yeah. Okay.
It's like
Oh, yeah.
Charlie Brown trying to kick the football. The Mets every year, we all get excited that we're going to do it, and we know what eventually happens.
Yeah. Right now, I'm just in Ranger. Just a whole Ranger mindset. So.
Yep.
I can't even think about it, but then I told you I saw a couple weeks ago Buck Showalter and Pete Alonso and all that at a card show. So yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. So I'll it must have been a good time there for your son too. I will get the
presentation. Cody had a talk talk about the Mets like Dallas Cowboys. Yeah, you could say that. We're yeah, and Tiffany with the Go Astros. That was a great event in Houston. That's a great ballpark, and my son is driving me nuts about Houston because he didn't go to that event, and we were going to do a Texas event, but the Texas Rangers are impossible to deal with because you can't run a conference the same day as a game. And there was this perfect weekend I wanted to do in May where it would have been the Astros, and I driven to the Rangers, but whatever.
I see a question from Ken Gibbons.
A real question, not about baseball. If a small player is too small suit, how does DOL penalties come into play?
Do you want to take that, or you want me to take that?
Well, I always believe that when we talk about litigation to me has always been the big boogeyman, because unless you're a large plan, typically you don't get sued. But we've seen small plans get sued. And quite honestly, I'd rather deal with a RISA litigator who doesn't know what the heck they're doing than a DOL auditor that does. But that's
yeah. And as far as the DOL audits and more specifically to Ken's question, when the DOL comes in to do these random, quote unquote, random field audits, they're not so random. They go through the 5500s and they look for flags as well. If you don't have a fidelity bond, hey, what else don't you have? So that's one of the things they're looking for, is that you have fidelity bond coverage on the 5500. Fidelity
bond coverage, and also the question, do you have late deferrals? And then sometimes later, if you didn't apply to their whole their VFCP program, they'll send you a letter, and now they're going to push self-correction. They're doing that whole program.
Exactly. And the key thing with the Department of Labor and the IRS field agents is they get paid like commission salespeople. So the more they find wrong, the better. So if you have your act together and they come in, the first thing they ask for is an investment policy statement. And it's not required under ERISA, but what it demonstrates to the Department of Labor and the IRS field auditors is that you have a process. So if they come in and say, can we see your most recent copy or your most recent version of your investment policy statement? And you say, oh, sure, here it is. We updated it last year with our advisor. They're almost like, darn, okay, we have to go through this audit. We're here. If you say, what's an investment policy statement? I have no idea what that is. Now they're going, okay, bring the boxes in, we'll be in the back. And now they know that there's no process, there's no documentation. They're going to spend more time on a thorough audit. So, yes, they might not get sued, but you still have to show, because these random audits come up, that you have a documented process, and the audit will still happen, but it'll go a lot smoother because they can see right from the get-go that you have your act together.
Yeah, Andy Ingram is making a joke saying that the attendance is low because of the Mets being at each location. And I just want Andy to know we ran an event in Seattle. It was against the Braves. I had 30 tickets, and Ed Dressel will swear to it. It was about 7 or 8 of us who actually showed up for the game. So that's for our friend, the Braves fan. Yep. But that's it, I guess, right?
Yeah, you got a couple of other questions, though. Can you prove there were no non-exempt transactions with the party in interest? I don't know how you prove a negative, but that's hard. But I don't know. Ari, any thoughts on that?
I don't know how you prove it, but how can you prove? Let's take their word. That's all I know.
Yeah, James, I can't see the full name on that. James Holland. So I don't know if you want to follow up with me or with Ari offline to go into more detail on that. But happy to talk to you about that if you want to. If anybody wants to email me, it's william.shories, SCHORIES, again, william.shories, SCHORIES @invesco.com. And I'll get the checklist of all 35 items as well as the slides over to Ari.
Yeah, Bill, and if we do have that event in June at that stadium that will be named later, I'll let you know.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank
you, everybody.
Thanks. And next, Josh Itzo, Fiduciary Works. Josh, you there? I thought I saw you.
I am. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I just want to point out my father was an electrician, so that wasn't really big job, but your dad was traveling secretary for the Baltimore Orioles for quite some time.
He was.
And I actually Googled you. You actually played for minor league baseball? Or is that
I did. I played for the Padres and the Dodgers. I I had a very inauspicious baseball career professionally, but yes, I did.
A lot better than me when I stopped in the 4th grade because I just, whatever.
All right.
Take it away.
Can you see my screen?
I can see it.
Good. Okay. Well, appreciate everybody hopping on, and thanks so much, Ari, for giving me the chance to take part and present. And today I want to share with you a strategy around winning and retaining retirement plans by quantifying and gamifying the fiduciary process. And just real quick, just background about me. I'm the founder and CEO of Fiduciary Works. Prior to that, in 2004, my best friend and I actually, in our late 20s, started an RIA called Greenspring Advisors. We came out of wirehouses, brought about $15 million with us, but over the next 17 years grew that to 26 people and $5.5 billion in assets. And of that $5.5 billion was a $4.5 billion 401k practice that I launched in 2006 and grew from there. Was well-known practice in the industry. We got 2018 Plan Sponsor Retirement Plan Advisor of the Year. I've written a couple of books, The Fiduciary Formula and Fixing the 401k, that are popular with advisors. If you have insomnia, I would say read one of those and it'll probably cure that for you. Host of a well-known podcast in the industry called the Fiduciary You Podcast. I'd encourage you to check it out. Have had great guests on there. Ari being one, Fielding Miller, Jerry Schlichter, Aaron Schum, you name it, a lot of who's who in the industry, and really, really good insights. But in 2021, I actually left. I sold my stake in Greenspring really to pivot to build fintech for advisors. One of the keys to the success of how I grew our practice was that I had built a number of fintech tools for my own practice to help grow and scale and make our business more efficient and more consistent. And I left because my heart was really to support the advisor community. And so I launched this company, Fiduciary Works, in 2021. We started developing a product called Fiduciary RX later that summer, launched it in March of 2022. And it's really kind of caught fire within the industry. We've got 60 plus firms, some of the top teams and advisors in the industry around the country that are using it. But really my goal for today is to really talk about 5 things. And it's really to focus on how you can implement a strategic assessment and planning process for prospects and for clients. I really believe that this is the key to how you both win business, but also retain business. A lot of times we think about selling is just selling new business, but it's incredibly important that you're constantly selling and reselling your clients on the value that you provide. So I want to talk about how you can implement a strategic assessment and planning process, some of the things you want to think about from that perspective, how you can engage in deeper conversations with your prospects and clients. One of my mentors says that he or she who controls the metaphor controls the conversation. And so we'll talk a little bit about some of the strategies that you can implement when you're engaging with your prospects and clients. How to incite curiosity in prospects and also inspire confidence in your clients. Again, it's both helpful from a winning new business, but also from a retention standpoint. How you can accelerate the sales process and do it very efficiently. And then finally, how you can quantify and gamify the fiduciary process. You've heard some good recommendations, I think, so far in the first 2 presentations. A lot of it, though, is manual, things like checklists and doing things manually. And there's a better way to be able to do that and to think both strategically how you do it, but also in the real world, how you implement that strategy. So let's start with, I want to revisit, and I think Lyle touched on this. I want to dive down a little bit deeper into it around the current marketplace. And he had referenced, and I'm referencing this as well, that Fidelity Plan Sponsor Attitudes survey. And he had mentioned that 47% in their most recent survey a couple of months ago, 47% of plan sponsors are actively looking and considering a new advisor. What's really interesting there is that 76% of the plan sponsors that were surveyed as part of that plan sponsor aptitude survey actually said that they were satisfied with their current advisor, even though almost half were actively considering a new advisor. And I think what we've all seen is that the marketplace has definitely evolved. We used to laugh about the two-plan Tony or two-plan Tina. They don't really exist anymore. The reality is the world has moved towards specialization. What I used to like to say was that I had fewer competitors, but everybody was really, really good. It was really, really fierce. And I think what you're seeing, especially with convergence, a lot of the M&A that's out there happening, you're seeing your clients most likely. It's easy to think that, and I probably would have done the same back in the day, that my clients wouldn't fall in that 47%. But the reality is your clients are most likely, they're getting called on by other advisors. And typically advisors lose business for one of two reasons. One is M&A, and that's really out of your control. You have a client, they get acquired, and you wind up losing the plan. But I would say that the other reason why advisors lose plans is that they give their clients a reason to consider other suitors. And you have to really be thinking about, in order to grow and to scale, and those are not the same thing, but to grow, you not only have to bring on new clients, you have to retain the ones that you have. What's interesting about that 47% was in 2022, but the trend is different. So in 2020, in that survey, 16% of plan sponsors said that they were actively considering a new advisor. Now, I think you could probably chalk that up to 2020. In the middle of COVID, people were more worried about keeping the doors open to their business than they were probably finding a new 401k advisor. But I think what 2020 did was it really showed plan sponsors whether or not they were working with a good advisor. You hear a lot of times the quote by Warren Buffett. He said, "You don't know who's swimming naked until the tide goes out." And I think 2020 was a watershed year because advisors that were just implementing the status quo, relying on the strength of their relationship, weren't being proactive, weren't being comprehensive. Really, I think clients and plan sponsors really identified that that was the case. And so I believe that's part of the reason why we're seeing so much transition out in the marketplace. We saw that number almost double in 2021 to 34%. And I think, again, the reason why is through that process, plan sponsors in many cases were probably fairly unhappy with the current advisors they were working with. And then in 2022, you get to that 47%. And again, just to highlight, 76% of people said that they were satisfied, but that they were open to considering other alternatives. When you look at a little bit deeper in that survey, here's what plan sponsors surveyed said that they want. They want better communication and education from their advisors. They want superior investment options. No shock there. Everybody wants better investments. And they wanted advisors who could deal with servicing issues more effectively. And I think what we've seen out in the marketplace with M&A around record keepers is we're seeing a kind of a really big shift. You're seeing a lot of consolidation, but you're also seeing, because of, I think, fee disclosure over the past, 10 years or so, you're seeing plan sponsors, you're seeing declining service levels, you're seeing RMs who maybe are more junior, not as experienced. You're seeing a push to self-service. You're seeing RMs that are taking on more plans. And so you're seeing response levels drop from, in some cases, when I could get questions, 5 years ago in 1 to 2 days from a record keeper, that might take 1 to 2 weeks or even longer. And I think that's a really, really big issue. I don't think we've seen a lot of fee compression directly hit the advisory industry yet. I think it's coming, and I think we're starting to see a semblance of that. I always used to say, though, that the challenge for us with a lot of record keepers was these declining service levels meant that when issues came up, our clients were coming to us to get involved. And so my team and I were hopping on, quarterly service review calls, sometimes even monthly, or there were operational issues that we had to get involved in. And we were glad to do it to support our clients. And our clients really valued it. But the reality was that impacted our ability to scale because it required more hands-on. A lot of times we couldn't charge more for doing that. And I like to call it indirect fee compression. The reality was it impacted our ability to grow and scale because we were spending more time on servicing issues and really stepping in to kind of play bad cop, if you will, with record keeper partners. And that just took us away from growth and scale focused activities. The second thing is that plan sponsors identified what impressed them. Number one, this trend towards specialization, a demonstrated knowledge of 401k plans at a very deep level. Number two, helping manage and control plan costs. And then lastly, a willingness to help with fiduciary responsibilities. And a lot of times you hear, and I even heard it on one of these presentations, you hear this, the triple F is done, fees, funds, and fiduciary. That's kind of old school. It's all about financial wellness now or something else. And I believe in financial wellness, but the reality is when you look at the data and you look at these responses, that fees and funds and fiduciary are still front and center in the mind of plan sponsors. It's still the foundation of what makes a really good retirement plan advisor and what makes a really successful plan. So let's talk about transitioning from that. What are things that you can do to win more business and retain and protect the borders against those competitors that you may have that are beating on your clients? So the first step that I believe is developing a strategic assessment and strategic planning process, and one that is forward-looking. And I'm going to talk about that on the next couple of slides. But you really want to be forward-looking with your prospects and even with your clients. And the key here is to make it comprehensive. We hear a lot about 338, 321, investment selection, investment due diligence. That's still very important, but that's become in many ways the most commoditized aspect of what it means to be a successful retirement plan advisor, much like what's happened in the private wealth industry. 20 years ago, when we started our firm, wealth management was really kind of high-end discretionary portfolio management with a little bit of financial planning thrown in. Nowadays, what you see is the most successful private wealth firms that are growing by leaps and bounds are the ones that lead with a planning first model, and portfolio management, investment management kind of follows that. It's a component of the process. It's not the primary role of the advisor, though. And the same thing is happening when it comes to the most successful retirement plan advisors. Investment selection and monitoring is probably 10 or 15% of the job. And to make it comprehensive, in my opinion, is really looking at 6 different dimensions of plan oversight. So first and foremost is fiduciary governance, plan design, fee structure, investment process, participant support, and provider management. So the key when you're developing a strategic assessment and planning process is to make it comprehensive, is to look at those 6 key areas, and then to assess whether or not best practices are in place. We know in the industry what best practices, some that are legal requirements and others, best practices, Fred Reich likes to say that those are things that go above and beyond what's required by the law. The goal of being a fiduciary is not to meet the minimal objectives of the law. It's to set aspirational goals for clients and then make sure that they're doing the things they need to meet those obligations and those requirements. So you want to be comprehensive when you assess a plan. The other thing is to make it actionable. Too many advisors come in and they want to talk about services. We do this. We'll do an investment policy statement. We'll take your minutes. We'll, benchmark your fees. The reality, though, is that is not what captures the hearts and minds of prospects and clients. Once you get a client, the sales process isn't over. Selling is less about a transaction, and it's more about moving people from where they are today and influencing them to go where you want them to go tomorrow. And so the key is in your assessment process is to make it actionable. If you do this, here's what the projected result is going to be. Now, not every time we make an assumption on something, it works out. And you need to have a both actionable but also flexible process that allows you to pivot. The way that I used to run our practice was the things I did, I had a methodology, but when we would try new things, a lot of cases it was like a science experiment. I had a hypothesis. If we do this, here's what the projected outcome was going to be. And then I would test it. And so I'd encourage you as an advisor working with your clients is to constantly, the way you innovate is you constantly run a set of science experiments, have a hypothesis, figure out a way to test it, see what the results are. When it works, lean into that. When it doesn't, figure out a way to pivot and what you need to go toward or what direction you need to go next. And then lastly, you have to make the process efficient. People think that growth and scale are the same thing. Growth and scale are not the same thing. They're related, but they're not the same. Growth is really around top line revenue at any cost. I just want to keep bringing on plans. Scale is different. It's about growing your top line with the same resources you currently have. And that's how you create margin and profitability in your practice. And one of the challenges with retirement plan advisors, especially much more than wealth advisors that tend to be better at implementing and leveraging technology, retirement plan advisors, in many cases, they want to do everything custom. They want to do it one-off. And you can't scale your business if every time you deal with something, you're doing it new or you're doing it differently. You have to figure out a way to have efficiency and consistency and repeatability. So you want to make your process efficient. When I first started, we would do this plan assessment. We had a methodology that I had come up with, but typically for a prospect, I would spend 3 to 4 hours, myself and my team, putting together this assessment. And here's the deal. I'd go in, I'd pitch it. Sometimes I'd win, sometimes I'd lose, but every time I was burning 3 to 4 hours of my team's time and running our RPMs at a really high level. And so that is challenging both in terms of team management. It's also challenging in terms of focusing on your highest and best use of time. So whatever process you have, you want to make it efficient. Don't spend 4 to 5 hours or 3 to 5 hours when you could spend 30 minutes or an hour doing something. That's the way you're going to scale. So you want to make your strategic assessment and planning process as efficient as possible. The second thing is really engaging in those deeper and more meaningful conversations with your prospects and clients. And one of the things that I believe in and the way that I tried to engage with my prospects and clients was to focus more on the why and not the what. The what is when we tell prospects or clients, do this. But the why is really making a clear and cohesive and convincing argument that captures their hearts and minds and gets them to move from where they are today to where you want to take them. Instead of asking, why should I do this? If you can capture their hearts and minds and give them vision about where you want to take them over time, they're going to stop asking, why should we do this? And so you're telling us we'd be a fool if we didn't. And so that's really key. Focus on the why, not the what. The other thing is you always want to be looking forwards, not backwards. As retirement plan advisors, we are trained to look backwards. Hey, here's how your funds have done over the past 1, 3, 5, 10 years. Here's what your fees were when we benchmarked them 6 months ago. Here's the RFP that we did 18 months ago when we went out to market to make sure that you're with the right record keeper and TPA. And it doesn't, I'm not saying that you shouldn't be doing things that are backwards looking. That's just part of the gig. But the real secret is being able to cast aspirational vision, long-term goals for where you want to take clients, and then helping them see an actionable step-by-step approach to get from where they are today to where you want to take them in the future. And the power of that is for prospects, you can show them how you're going to be different than what they're currently experiencing. But for clients, the power is when you cast vision and then you help them achieve those goals. And then you look backwards and show them, look at everything we've accomplished over time. It's a very powerful retention play. We all know, and if you're advisors, I used to do it, I'm sure you do it, right? When you get a prospect, you're going in and trying to poke as many holes in what they're currently doing as possible. You're trying to disparage hopefully in a professional way, but to show like, hey, you're not with the right advisor, you should be with us because we're going to do all these different things. One of the most important things of reselling your clients and tracking accomplishments and milestones for them is to show them everything that's been done. So when that competitor comes in and is trying to poke holes in your process, the client is able to see and visualize, oh, we've done all these different things that this other advisor is saying that we should do. We're already there. We don't need to move away from where we are. And then lastly, part of that is when you cast vision. And I really believe that the most valuable role of an advisor is to provide leadership. It's to convince your clients to do the things that they're not going to do on their own. And the way you do that is casting vision and creating that comprehensive and convincing and compelling reason why they should. And when you do that, you present a better fiduciary future. Here's where you are today, but don't worry. It's not about where you are today or even how you got there. What's more important is about where we're going to go together as a team over the next 3, 5, 7, 10 years, and how that's going to benefit your organization and help you manage your risk, and how that's going to drive outcomes for your people and help them achieve a more secure retirement. Part of the sales process, both to prospects and clients, is inciting, I think, curiosity with prospects, and then giving clients the confidence that they've done the things that they need and that you've implemented the capabilities for them to help them have a successful plan. And I go back to this idea of setting ambitious and aspirational goals. If you're not having professional but challenging conversations with your clients, then I would tell you, you're probably not doing your job. If your goal is just to get hired and stay hired, then by all means, don't challenge your clients. Don't rock the boat. Don't engage in difficult conversations. But if you want to make a difference and you want to build a superior practice, then you need to be having challenging conversations with your clients. You need to be presenting a better way to do things. And you need to be persistent. You know, the way that I got married was I had to ask a bunch of times, right? I didn't stop at the first no. A lot of times clients and prospects will push back. They will you'll say something and they'll push back on you. And the key is to be persistent in the midst of that. In many cases, you may talk about automatic enrollment, let's say as an example, or automatic escalation, best practices that we know drive outcomes and move the needle. And you may have a client that pushes back on that. Well, a lot of advisors just say, well, I did my job, I brought it up, that's it. I would tell you that you should continue over time to continue to bring that up, to challenge them, and to help them see why certain best practices lead to better fiduciary futures. The other thing is to simplify the complex. A lot of advisors, and I was guilty of this at times, especially early on in my career, is we live in this world every day. Our clients don't. We get down in the weeds. And the key, Woody Guthrie said that any damn fool can make a simple thing complex, but a true genius makes the complex simple. And that's really the key. Fiduciary governance and oversight, it is complex. And so you need to be able to simplify that in a way that you can go deep if they need to, but don't require your clients to engage at a super deep level with you. Engage their hearts and minds at the 30,000 foot level and create a narrative and a story and a message and an argument in a simple way for why they should do what you're telling them to do. And then lastly, the key is always showcasing your expertise and process. And that's really what your strategic assessment and planning process should do. It should show that you are a specialist, that you know the things that they need to do and you know why they need to do them, and you can craft that argument. So making sure that you showcase your expertise and process, not just for prospects, but for clients as well over time. And that's why it's so important to track accomplishments and milestones for them. You have to resell them. Your clients, you do great work for them. I used to do great work for my clients. It wasn't perfect, but I did great work for them. And my clients, I would say, generally speaking, because we tracked it every year through surveys, were very satisfied. But if I'm being honest, they forgot 80 or 90% of what I did for them. And so every year, part of our process was going back and saying, hey, look at all the things that we accomplished. I had to resell them over and over and over again so that they remembered. They weren't going to remember on their own. And then finally, one of the ways to accelerate the sales process is setting clear priorities and using a philosophy called chunking, in my opinion. You know, if I say to you, or if you have a goal of losing 30 pounds, that can seem like a really big goal and really hard to overcome and achieve. But if you break that down into its component parts, hey, my goal based on the how much I'm going to exercise or the food decisions that I make, my goal is to lose 1.5 to 2 pounds a week. And if I do that over 3 or 4 or 5 months, if I consistently do that and I implement the right actions and behaviors and I make the right choices consistently day by day, if you do that, over time, losing 30 pounds is going to take care of itself. But if you come in and try to think about achieving that goal right from the get-go, it can seem overwhelming. That's very important with your prospects and clients as well. You can't go in and say, hey, your plan sucks. You've got 30 things you need to do. That might be true, but you're going to run into a roadblock. But if you can say, hey, in phase 1, we're going to focus on these 3 to 5 priorities. And once we knock those out, we're going to then set the next priorities. And in phase 2 and phase 3 and phase 4, really, really important. And as you start to implement and knock those out, little by little, what you'll find is that you start to gain momentum with your clients. And they start to begin to ask, okay, what's next? What do we have to do next? What's next on the docket? Also focusing on actions and outcomes. That is, I think, incredibly important, not just talking about, hey, here are the services we provide, but more on the actions and outcomes that you want to achieve, and then the strategy that you have to get there. And then don't try to sell the unsellable. Too many advisors do this. I was guilty of it. I would go in and I would talk to a prospect. My goal in the sales process, they thought they were interviewing me. Well, that might be true, but I was interviewing them. And I wanted to know very quickly, as quickly as possible, do they have a vision that is aligned with what I believe? Life is too short to work with clients that, even though they may hire you, are going to fight you at every turn. So part of the key is not trying to sell the unsellable or convince the unconvincible. If you find out very quickly, and in most cases, in 5 or 10 minutes, you can know if the magic is there. If you're getting a ton of pushback or you're getting a very defensive posture, in many cases, it just politely say, you know what, we're probably not a great fit, based on what you believe and what we believe. Because here's what's going to happen. Even if they hire you, you're going to walk out of every committee meeting and want to beat your head against the wall because they're going to have fought you on everything you're recommending, or they're not going to want to take the actions that you know they should be taking. And so that's part of, at least one of the things I learned over the years, is not trying to sell the unsellable. It's not worth it. It ultimately leads to a bad marriage. And then lastly, quantifying and gamifying the process. Our brains are wired in a way that we like simplicity. In a world of complexity, we like simplicity. And that's why we like scores. Being able to come up and assess and create a score for clients, to create a score around the fiduciary governance process, is very powerful. People may not like their score, but they like the idea of a score because that shows them, okay, how am I doing? And then if they don't like that score, being able to present to them that vision of, yeah, but if you do these things, if we set these priorities, here's how your score might be a 30 today. But if we do these things over time, we're going to get you to an 80. People like to be able to quantify and gamify things. Also, visualizing how each action that they take will lead to score improvement. Is really, really important. Hey, if you do this, you're going to get 3 points. If you do that, you're going to get 5 points. And I'm going to talk about something very briefly, the platform that I built, Fiduciary RX, on the next slide. This was something I built for my own firm back in 2012, and it was incredibly valuable in changing the dynamic of the conversation around scoring the entire process. And then lastly, remembering to very quickly and efficiently being able to track your accomplishments and your milestones that you've achieved for the plan or that the committee has achieved, so that you can show that progress and that improvement. And so these are 5 strategies as you begin to think about your process that I think can be really beneficial. I know as we deployed them in my practice, they really helped us win more business. They helped us retain the clients that we had. And The best way to do this, at least in my opinion, is the platform I built called Fiduciary RX. It's become very popular in the industry. You can do assessments in 5 minutes or less. You can track how you move your plans and your clients to a better fiduciary future really, really efficiently. You can manage your committees, things like meeting minutes and tracking accomplishments and milestones. You can look at cost management, not just benchmarking, but decision support tools in terms of how you can optimize cost structure. Whatever you use, whether it would be something like this or something else, you need to be able to make sure that you're implementing technology and using it efficiently to help you streamline and scale. The advisors of the future who are going to succeed are not the ones that do everything manually and custom one-off. It's the ones who have a repeatable process that they can implement on an efficient, consistent basis. Really quickly, just some of the components of Fiduciary RX. It's a modular approach. We have a fiduciary scoring and gamification engine. You can see under the left, fiduciary management. There's a cost management component, as I mentioned, some really cool committee management features, things like meeting minutes that maybe take you 30 to 40 minutes now to do, you can do in under 10 minutes. And one of the things that I think Bill had mentioned, fiduciary training, that's become a really big focus that's out there, and finding a way to efficiently be able to scale that. We've built a fiduciary training platform that can be branded to firms to be able to do that. So keys to success. Winning business is hard. And there's no doubt about that. It is a grind, but being able to demonstrate your process is incredibly important. Show your prospects, not just about where they are today, but where you want to take them over time. Cast that vision and then deliver on it. Always reminding clients of what you've done for them. You have to resell them on why you're the right advisor. And the way you do that is by showing them all the actions and outcomes that you've achieved. And by doing that, you're going to win more business, and you're going to retain the ones that you have, and you're going to be able to build a more efficient business that creates scale so that you can grow revenue and increase profitability, but also not run your team and their RPMs at 7,000. So many advisory firms burn out their teams. I used to struggle with this because we were doing so much more for clients. They were asking for it, but our team was really running, at a red line, and figuring out a way to be more efficient, more repeatable, more consistent is absolutely key to the health of your team, which ultimately impacts the health of your clients. And so if you're interested in learning about Fiduciary RX, what I would tell you, go to fiduciaryworks.com. You can book a demo. You can sign up for a 2-week trial, and it's a great platform. A lot of top advisors are using it. And it can help you operationalize a lot of the things that I talked about so that you can work smarter, work faster, be a hero to your clients, and make your clients a hero to their people. So appreciate the time. I encourage all of you. I think the work you do is absolutely incredible. I believe that the decision to hire the right fiduciary advisor for a plan sponsor actually is going to have the biggest impact on the financial future of their employees over the next 10, 20, 30 years. There's a compound effect, and the work you do is meaningful. It's important, and you get to impact a tremendous amount of lives, and then build a great business and a great career and create opportunity for your people along the way. So thanks so much for the time. Keep up the hard work, and I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Josh. Great presentation. And for those who ask, I have the presentation. If you want to email me, Josh sent it to me, so we could certainly send it out. Andy Ingram said, he was really impressed with it, and James said the ROI. James Holland said that the ROI on this is great. So thank you. Next presentation. I always joke that I've never taken a marketing class, and of course, I'm sure people will say that shows. But I think that when it comes to retirement plan providers, there's just not a lot of good marketing out there. So that's why it's always great to talk to people that know a thing or two. And she's a big Chicago fan, so Chicago sports fan. So Shauna, take it away.
Thank you. Yeah, I also have a very complex relationship with the Met, so I'm going to try and keep that one in check for you guys. Um, so let me go ahead and share what I've got cooked up for you guys. So everyone else had kind of kicked off with some background, and ironically, I actually, I'm trying to think if I've actually officially taken marketing classes. My background's in journalism, and so a lot of what I learned about audience research and creating engaging content started there, and then it transitioned into marketing. So I started in television at the peak of the financial crisis. My background was in Middle East studies, and I didn't know anything about finance. And I remember having to ask my journalism professor who did business journalism, what is a security? Because she's talking about the securitization of mortgages. And so I always remembered that feeling of not understanding the financial services industry and being thrown into the deep end. And thankfully, I learned how to speak finance and how to talk about it and engage people on it because I built a career out of it. But I never lost that feeling of not understanding this jargon. And I think that is really core to marketing and to content marketing and everything that we're going to talk about today. It's something that the other panelists have all touched on. And hopefully we can use sort of that commonplace, let's speak in English. What are we talking about? What is content? To create that connective thread around marketing so it stops being so scary. So when I switched into content marketing, I remember someone asking me, hey, I know you're looking to leave news because you don't like the hours. Do you want to do content? And I remember thinking, it was like someone asking me if I wanted to do words, like what content is just a thing. What do you mean, do I want to do content? And it's become this buzzword in the marketing industry. But it really is the best word to encompass a lot of what we're talking about. So I'm going to stick with it, but I'm going to try and kind of explain to you some of that marketing jargon, content, et cetera, throughout as we go. So first things first, the same way that content is kind of a meaningless word, so in a lot of ways is finance or even investing. The financial services industry is so large that a lot of people don't necessarily understand what your role as a financial advisor is going to be. This is particularly important if you're serving plan sponsors as well as end investors, if you have a lot of different exposures. So being able to really concisely say what you do and the value you add so that you can avoid being lumped in with Wall Street, especially if you're dealing with a client base that doesn't trust Wall Street. There's a lot of folks who don't understand the ins and outs of finance, even if they understand the basics, and they're never going to tell you that. I remember being at an annuity conference and asking someone to explain their derivative hedge to me, and they just kept saying, we use derivatives, and me asking, are you buying calls? Are you buying puts? Are you selling calls? Like, what is your strategy here? Just derivatives doesn't necessarily mean that you're hedged. And their face just went totally blank because all they had learned was that they had to say that they were hedging with derivatives. So just don't take for granted that just because someone has a lot of money, has a plan, it works in an industry that they understand everything. Always start as simple as possible and go from there, and just be mindful that you're competing now against TikTok and the Wall Street Journal and everyone else. You're not just competing against other advisors. When I say that people don't understand finance, I'm not just talking about regular folks. They're also highly wealthy, plugged in people don't understand money. Now, one thing to be cautious of, we talk a lot about financial literacy across the board. The most recent data that everyone is pulling from on this is an S&P study that was done in 2014. So it's almost a decade old at this point. I would wager that Americans are starting to understand their money better, but not necessarily in a good way. So Gen Z is learning a lot about money because of TikTok or exposure to things like crypto or turmoil in the markets causes people to learn about investing, but they don't necessarily know the basics or best principles or the kinds of things that you're going to want them to know. And with that in mind, YCharts just released a new study this month, I think this week, saying that nearly half of wealthy investors want to hear from their financial advisor more. And not only that, about 9 in 10 of those folks are going to consider how frequently they hear from you and the quality of those communications as part of whether they stay with you and part of whether they will recommend you. So this retention and prospecting that we were talking about, how you communicate with your client matters on that. And communications are one form of content. So when we're talking about content and marketing, how you reach out to clients isn't just picking up the phone and calling them. It's those emails, it's that whatever. And thinking about it beyond your client relationship, thinking of it in terms of maybe a content strategy or a marketing strategy allows you to kind of scale the effort a little bit so that you can be as efficient as possible and still do this outreach that we know is so important to clients. And that's also so important to your business. It reflects who you are. It's why clients work with you. So this is just a little summary of what I've seen in terms of current advisor outreach and sort of the flaws that are therein. So it tends to be heavily focused on in-person or one-on-one meetings. You just heard Josh go into a lot of detail about those 4-hour meeting preps that he would go into, whether he would win that business or not. And, you know, the thing that's so great about personalized prep is it showcases you and your personality, but it's also really not scalable or efficient. A lot of people then will try and increase their outreach or their content by going to the other extreme. They're going to go to a canned content service. They're going to sign up with someone who will just churn out content that they maybe, if a client asks them about it, they don't know the answer to it because they just published this post from a third party. Or you think that you have to lean into being your own content source and write your own blog with a post a week or 2 posts a week, or create your own TikTok video empire. And none of that's really true, but those extremes are where people tend to go when they try to scale past one-on-one meetings. The other very common problem is scaling past one-on-one meetings and automating it via maybe a mail system or something, but leading with your services or leading with sales. If you are on, say, Twitter and you tweet every day, but all you're tweeting out is our product is so great, or this is my services as an advisor, that's not going to be the best way of engaging people. They're going to start to tune you out as just being sales focused. So how can you shift that thinking and how can you get better at it? Well, starting to realize that you're not just competing against other advisors is one way of thinking about it. You're competing against news sites who do education. You're competing against folks who aren't fiduciaries and aren't even trained or educated in these topics. So starting to think about how you can build trust before that first meeting. If you wanted someone to refer you, what would you want them to say about you? Can you go ahead and say that yourself in some way? Can you make that point on your own? And one way of doing that, by the way, is thinking about the questions that you find yourself answering repeatedly, whether it's in prospect meetings or client meetings, and making those readily available to people. So that's kind of an overview of where we're at and how to start shifting your mindset. How that intersects with content marketing. So what content marketing is, this content, it's the creation or sharing of educational or entertaining materials that do not explicitly promote a brand, but are still intended to generate interest in its product or services. When we're talking about anything in the finance world, we tend to skew way more towards educational than entertaining. There are some entertaining things you can do, but it's a little bit more limiting. And when we say that they don't explicitly promote a brand, there's one thing that you can do with educational content that's really great, is that you stay very neutral and you just provide your best possible advice. And then at the end, you call out how you can help someone implement that advice. I like to use the analogy of it's like going to Home Depot with your contractor. They're going to explain to you how everything works. And then they can be like, and by the way, we already have this. We can do this for you. We can do X, Y, Z, but this way, you know what you're buying and you feel a lot more confident as the client in that scenario. Articles are often a really easy way to start. Infographics can be incredibly helpful. Infographics essentially meaning anything that is visually driven or graphic driven. A lot of times people in financial services make this charts or performance reports. Those can be great. They're better than blank text or writing about performance in text, but that is not the only thing that you should be thinking about when we're talking about infographics. Like, what does that chart actually say? What does it mean? How can you distill that information and create a takeaway? Videos, not always the best medium for financial services, funnily enough. They've changed. This has been changing with the advent of TikTok, and YouTube has become a lot more prominent, but the idea that videos become easier to edit and easier to digest and people are more comfortable with it, that's changed. But in general, charts, etc., are the default, and that's not always going to be as exciting as something way more visual like sports. Sports is an easy thing. You want to see a video of a sports play more than a still photo. With finance, that's not always the case. Finally, podcasts. Every financial advisor I know wants to start a podcast. And in some ways, that's a great idea because the audience for podcasts tends to be more educated. It tends to be wealthier. But just think about the amount of work that goes into a podcast, having to consistently book guests, having to talk to those guests, having to have the podcast edited, having to come up with clips, having to send those short clips and promotional materials out. Do you have a built-in audience, or do you have to build an audience from scratch? Podcasts can be a lot more complex than people tend to think of at the outset when they're like, hey, this is a good idea. So that's just sort of an overview of what we're talking about when we talk about content marketing. But you still have to do it. You got to figure out some way of doing content marketing. Part of the reason that you have to figure it out is because the big firms and the people that you're competing against know this. So these examples on this slide are all from financial services firms, TD Ameritrade, big on education, something that's continuing with Schwab. Bank of America, this program is one that I actually worked on back when I was still at agencies. Goldman Sachs has a whole big TED Talk style innovation theory where they featured John Lewis. Obviously, this was when John Lewis was still with us, but really they were trying to tell you something about their brand beyond just their brand by what they're choosing to showcase. So Goldman Sachs having someone who has only a tertiary connection to financial services be a featured speaker says something about Goldman Sachs to the person watching that. Bank of America doing something about your work from home budget, acknowledging that our lifestyles are changing, that the way that we work is changing. That says something about them. And on the left is what we call the marketing funnel. And this is here to kind of give you the marketing context for why these big firms want to use content marketing. So when we talk about marketing, there's the world at large who has to then become aware of your brand or the services that you're offering. Generally speaking, it takes something like 7 to 8 times of interaction with a name or a company before you even remember that company exists. So when we talk about content marketing, you might be needing to put a lot of stuff out there just to get that name recognition. Once someone recognizes your name, they have to start considering whether or not they want to work with you. So they have to understand a little bit about what it is that you do. And then you also have to understand what they're considering you against. Are they considering you versus another advisor? Are they considering you versus not having an advisor at all, just doing it themselves? Are they considering you versus a big advisor or a small? What you need to know that so that you can position yourself appropriately. And then finally, once you convert them to a client, ideally, the game doesn't end there. You have to keep engaging them and re-engaging them so that they don't, as Josh pointed out, get wooed away by someone else, that they don't get distracted. You have to kind of continue to remind them about the value that you have to offer. And one way of doing that is content. So content's just becoming the gold standard, coming up with some kind of article, infographic, video system, podcast that explains what it is that you do is becoming the industry standard. And so by this point, you might be thinking like, okay, you've convinced me that I need to come up with content of some kind, but what do I make? What content do I do? How do I think about this? And I promise I will get to that. But first, I want to encourage you to think outside of the box before we get into some of the basics that are going to kind of keep you in the box. So I like to use non-finance examples because, as everyone has been saying, we tend to stick in our financial services world with charts and all of these images, and we tend to forget that there is a much broader world out there. So when you think about the client user or the client experience when they're working with you, and this is a non-marketing thing, when they come log into your advisory website, how does that experience compare to Amazon or Netflix or a consumer site that they are logging into every day? That is a much better metric for you to think about than how your login process compares to another financial advisor or even to a big bank or brokerage. Think about how that experience is going to be from the client point of view, because what they are encountering for 95+% of their time has nothing to do with financial services. They're more likely to be encountering Kim Kardashian or Kylie Jenner, both of whom have now huge billion-dollar brands. There's just this, chat about Kim Kardashian speaking at Harvard Business School. And they did that by starting, well, we can debate what content kicked that off, but it got kicked off by content, including a reality show where we got used to them being entertaining. We got used to their Instagram accounts and thinking, hey, how does Kylie do her makeup? How did she get her lips so big? And she decided to say it was because of, a makeup kit and not plastic surgery. So the point being that content can create curiosity, it can create questions, it can create that engagement and awareness that allows you to then pivot the conversation to conversion, where you are able to then sell them something, sell your services, or show them the value that you bring to the table. One of my favorite content marketing examples is not the Kardashians. It's actually sports related. I'm going to pull up and play for you briefly one of the best clips of all time. So this is an ad by Budweiser. It has nothing to do with the Cubs. I mean, I think the Cubs at the time were a sponsor, or Budweiser was a sponsor of the Cubs, but anyone who has lived in Chicago or been a Cubs fan will get choked up watching this.
Sure as God made green apples, someday the Chicago Cubs are going to be in the World Series, and maybe sooner than we think.
Harry Carey's long dead at this point, for the record, in case people are less familiar with him. He was an announcer for St. Louis and the White Sox at first, but then longtime announcer for the Cubs.
Carey at Cleveland, it's such a pleasure to see you, especially on a noteworthy night indeed. Cubs 3 outs away from winning. Boy, if you got a weak heart. In the center. The Redskins stay with us. A crowd quiet.
This game 7 extra innings after a rain delay.
Big ball. It's a throw.
And it plays a lot more of that until it gets to
Great penalty. So long, everybody.
now. I am biased. That makes me almost cry every time I watch it. Ooh, YouTube is still going at me. But as you'll notice on that, there was no overt mention of Budweiser, right? Ooh. Did I disappear? No, okay. There was no overt mention of Budweiser in that. So I somehow managed to minimize. Oh, there we go. All right, let me reshare. Let me go back to the deck. So Budweiser wasn't prominent in that, but it's a Budweiser ad. And by tapping into the utter sentimentality of Cubs fans like me, who tend to be located across the country, Budweiser has created a loyal customer for life, except for maybe when we're playing St. Louis. So that's the kind of thing that an advisor can capitalize on. What are your clients emotional about, and what do they have questions about? What are they feeling uncertain about? And can you answer those questions and make promoting yourself the secondary thing? Maybe promoting yourself is just the title card at the end and saying, by the way, this is something that we can help you with. But you're leading with what they want to see and what they care about versus what you want to say or what you care about. It's this idea of being audience first. And that is what tends to make the most resonant content, because you're putting yourself in your client's shoes and thinking, okay, what do I need? What do I want? And then you're delivering that. So how do you get started doing that? How do you get in your client's head? So here are 3 of my favorite tips, especially these days. And one is loss aversion. So there's some debate about whether content should always be very positive or whether you should be more realistic and fear mongering. I tend to skew towards positivity, even though there's a reason that people do negative attack ads, they work. But how can you be positive and also tap into the psychology of your clients? And that is loss aversion. People are scared of making a mistake. They're 2 times more scared of losses than they are excited about winning. So what content can you use to reassure them about making a mistake? chances are, I made a huge mistake the first time I invested in a 401k plan because I used a target date fund I didn't understand how target date funds worked. I thought like, hey, I'm going to work extra hard and retire early, and therefore I should use an earlier target date fund, not understanding that that was going to put me in 40% bonds at the beginning of the greatest bull market in history. Not great. Estate planning, another great one to lean into if you do that as an advisor or on the side of your firm that's separate from working with plan sponsors. Inflation risk versus market risk, a huge one to talk about right now because, cash is kind of crap and the market's kind of crap. Covering the basics is also a big one. These are the questions that people feel too stupid to ask, but often have. Every adult near retirement that I know has at one point or another pulled me over and asked me to explain the difference between price and yield when it comes to bonds. And I explain it to them, and then I have to tell them that unless they're building a bond ladder, that they have to forget everything I just told them, and here's how total return funds work. Any kind of jargon explainer I have ever created has done incredibly well. And this is also one where you can edge out some of the big banks that don't want to do this kind of content because they think that it makes them look like a dictionary. Getting into things like the different types of retirement plan and how that can help someone understand their plan or the plan that you're working with in comparison to an IRA or, a Roth IRA, all of that. And then the difference, this is a big one now with Secure 2.0, I think the difference between regulations versus offerings. So just because the government has now said that plan sponsors can do, matching contributions to a Roth 401k, doesn't mean that that's going to be available in your plan if there's no Roth option. So covering some of those basics is a great way to knock out questions your clients have that they maybe don't know that they have or that they don't want to ask. It also can help with Google search terms, and that flows into the next one. Answer questions. Any questions that you find yourself getting frequently, if you can create an article or a video answering those questions, you are saving yourself time and you're making that actual conversation with the client or prospect way more productive. In addition to that, not just what questions people are asking you, but what topics do you bring up with clients most often? What are their gaps in knowledge that you think they need to know about? And how can you get them interested in those before they end up in your office? Getting it done, once you kind of have some idea of what you want to create content about, I recommend creating a few basics. So some of this can be marketing materials. It can be your prospectus or plan prospectus that you're creating for the sponsor that they're going to hand out to their clients, or different ways that you're going to engage with people. But try to lead with education-focused FAQs, and you can put very clearly your role and how you can help or not help with different things as a call out that very clearly is separate from the education. That shows transparency, which breeds trust. It also shows where you come in to add value. It makes your services extra valuable in the context of all these other things. And something that you can also do is acknowledge competitors. If you work differently than other advisors and you charge differently or you process things differently, acknowledge that, because Lexus doesn't win market share by saying, hey, by pretending, Honda doesn't exist. They say Honda exists, and if you want a cheap and stable car, that's great. If you want superior performance and luxury and reliability and our brand, that's what makes us great. So you can acknowledge what other people do without disparaging what it is that you do. And that can, in a lot of ways, again, engender trust, because you're saying, hey, this is what I bring to the table. It may or may not be what you're looking for. Let's figure that out. Use third parties where appropriate. If the investments that you're advising someone put in their fund have content available already, pull from that where you can. You don't have to reinvent the wheel at every single turn. You can also share media, so news stories or posts that you find, educational videos. This is one that you have to sometimes talk to your compliance department about. Before you share a Wall Street Journal story, they might want to make sure that it doesn't espouse views that you don't 100% agree with. But you don't always have to reinvent the wheel. It can be a little bit more casual too. Like, hey, this is what we're reading or finding interesting. These are trends that we're watching. And so when you see data like, hey, clients want to hear from their advisors more, they want to hear from you more, it doesn't always have to be something that you generate from scratch. It can be as simple as what I found interesting this week and what can help you going forward. Becoming an expert can also help, because then you can become the content that you're not creating, because you'll be featured on news stories or in industry events, etc. Then you become part of content, but you're not the one who has to create it. That said, creating it yourself does help. So if you, if someone wants to have you come do a news story or feature you as an expert, the first thing that they're going to do is go look at your own channels, like your website or your YouTube or something like that, to see how you are on camera or how you present things. And if they like what they see, then they will bring you on and you'll get that earned content. And then you can take that earned content and use it to create more on your own site. So it creates a really great cycle. You just have to get started. So finally, as part of all of that, outsourcing can be really great. You can hire consultants to do this. You can work with partners. Again, if you're already working with partners on things like a plan, you can go in together maybe to work with a consultant or a third-party creator. You can leverage technology. There are a lot of design software things that are available now, whether it's Canva or AI stuff that's available with ChatGPT. I'm not saying that you should lean all in on that, but explore some of the different options so that you're not reinventing the wheel or having to do all of this from scratch. Finally, I promised you compliance. I have found that creating content can help your relationship with compliance in a lot of different ways. It forces you to explain your offerings in English, which often forces you to understand them in a much different way and much better / more nuanced ways, where you can spot maybe investment options that you don't want to include in the plan, or you can figure out the best way to explain things. I'm not an expert in compliance, so when I say this, please defer to all of the lawyers who've spoken and are much better at this than me. But to that end, make friends with your compliance department. When I was in-house at TD Ameritrade, got into back and forth with compliance all the time, because they would say, hey, include this jargonese. And I wouldn't want to put that in there because I thought it would confuse the viewer. So I would say, okay, what if we said it this way? Would that address the problem that you're seeing in the original? And would go back and forth, because I was insisting on finding a way to ditch jargon and not have compliance put more jargon back into my copy. One way that you can do this, by the way, is to start simple and then put in the conditions. So if you want to say, here's what this means in basic English or what we're offering, and then say, of course, there are exceptions, yada, yada, yada. That's a great thing to do with tax, by the way. Just explaining the high level basics and linking out to the IRS or saying exceptions apply. And then I have some favorites in here that I can, share that you'll see when you get your deck. And then look, I want to be Budweiser in this. I will give you a card that says that I create content for firms. I do consulting or ongoing engagements and can help with creating content so that you don't have to do it. I have a whole system that I built based on it, but I really wanted to focus this on education so that you had a lot of options at the end of this other than just calling me. And in a lot of ways, I would encourage you to kind of mimic some of that when you are creating content. Like, if what you are offering them is educational and helpful, then hopefully they will reach out to you and want to work with you and want to learn more from you specifically. And you're not just handing the business to someone else. I tried to make up some time, Ari, but that is a wrap on me, unless anyone has any questions.
No, I didn't see any, but it's just the Harry Carey story. So the story was, the rumor and innuendo was that he was having an affair with Gussie Bush's daughter-in-law, and that's why he got fired from St. Louis.
I've heard that.
Went to the Chicago White Sox. Was it Haleman beer or whatever? That was like the local beer. I think that's what he was.
Hams?
What, Heleman? It was
Okay.
that was the old beer, and it's kind of like the Chicago version of Rheingold, which was a Brooklyn beer. And then he went to the Cubs. And what's kind of funny now is his grandson Chip just got the job to be the play-by-play for the St. Louis Cardinals.
Which is funny. The other funny thing is that the Cubs last year, 2 years ago, hired the youngest announcer in Major League Baseball history. He was still at U of I when they hired him. He was 21 years old. He's fantastic, though.
It's Chip's. It was who's that? It was Chip's son?
Jared Padalecki, I want to say, or no, that's the guy in Gilmore. Jared something. He's out of U of I. He's for the Cubs though, not St. Louis.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Ed, are you there? I see you're there. Yep. Ed, how are you?
I am doing well. I'm on the road, but excited to share. Nice to be here. Fun to be a part of this. good content so far. Really enjoying it.
Honored to see you at a ballpark, but you know, we'll see what we're doing.
Yeah, that was a fun time. I mean, so for those people that are listening that missed Seattle's a great place in September.
Yeah, my wife and the kids, they want to go back. That's how much they liked it and whatnot. So
It's
we'll probably
absolutely-
be there next summer.
Okay, there we go. Share screen. Okay, so well, you're gonna go back. Are you hosting an event again, or are you
No,
just
no,
gonna-
no. We do
fun.
once. I mean, there's certain cities that we've done before that we're due again. I definitely want to go back to Wrigley Field. But you know, there's some I have to get out of the way because I got to get to 30 ballparks and I'm 6 away.
Okay,
If I do 3 this year, 3 to 4 to this year, then you know, probably Cincinnati will be my last one.
okay, excellent. Well, looking forward to this. I'm going to talk a little bit about engaging participants, which many people may. Is everything working there, Ari?
Yep, I see a screen.
Okay, so engaging participants, most people go, plan advisors goes, there's no money in this. You're going to hear different anecdotal stories. Some very successful advisors have substantially grown their business through participant engagement. On 2 different levels. One, they differentiate themselves with the employer, the plan sponsor, because not too many people are doing it. And then secondly, they get outside accounts getting rolled in, and over we hear that. But before I get going down that street, I want to talk a little bit. We've been at this for over 35 years now. We've been very successful in the 403B side, 457 side, and took some of the success we're learning there and applied it to 401k world, and are having a lot of fun, really helping advisors engage individuals towards retirement success. Let's see if I can get, a few years ago, I went over to a friend's house, Richard and Charlene. My wife had dinner with him and his wife and his adult children. We had a great time. He's about 60 at the time. And I was talking to Richard. We were at the dinner table, just laughing, having a fun time. I'd known him for probably about 20 years and just really enjoying the evening. And then in the middle of dinner, Richard says, I asked Richard, I said, what does retirement look like for you? I was expecting him to give his vision and tell me how he was doing and what he was going to do with his time. And Richard told me I probably should start saving. Now, Richard's was a blue collar worker, meat cutter, journeyman, made decent money. And at 60 years old, it's a little late. And that statement was a kick to my gut. It ruined the dinner for me. Took all the joy out. I went home feeling like, why couldn't Richard have done better? And why are we here with Richard? And I think you've heard several things said today. Shauna said it, Lyle said it, different ways. Excuse me. You got to keep things simple. Cover the basics, Shauna said. Lyle said you can't say equities and fixed incomes. And one of the clients said, don't say that. And the problem is, we live in a complex world and we want to use simple. It's hard to use simple words. It's like walking into kindergarten trying to teach and being a financial advisor. How do you engage these people? And nobody engaged Richard. He probably sat in a 401k meeting. Could have easily been there, but didn't get engaged. Never started making contributions. And it had a ramification on him in retirement. Fidelity's plan sponsor survey in 2021 said sponsors are increasingly focused on the retirement plans meeting their employees' needs. They're looking to see how well is this meeting my employees' needs? Are they, is this engaging them? Is it meaningful to them? And this trend has been going on, and it hasn't stopped. It didn't stop in 2001. It's continuing to move forward. But how do you engage participants? And is that just a waste of time for a plan advisor? I would argue that it's not. I'm going to give you some stories of advisors that are doing that. One of the problems today, and this is typical in the financial services world, this is what people are understanding. Maybe they dropped the words equities and fixed incomes, and the couple kind of glossed over and had no idea what it was talking about. It's like, I don't understand a thing you're saying. And if they're making cartoons about it, they don't only make cartoons, but they make, I'll show you in a moment, a video commercial that makes fun of how we're doing. So how do we really comprehend retirement planning? People don't understand it. We just started, we're doing a market survey, and we did a focus yesterday with some participants in a retirement plan. And they said to us, we were just asking questions, oh, keep it so simple. We had a focus group, we're doing another one today with another group of people, trying to get an understanding if there's this new market. And they said, keep it simple. Don't make it as simple as possible. Bring it to, and I think, TikTok might be the good standard for, can you communicate it on TikTok? How do we help them get engaged and move forward? Here's a commercial that aired a few years ago. My bandwidth's a little limited at the hotel I'm at. I hope you get the idea of it. Here we go. Oops, sorry about that. So E-Trade wants us to use their account, but it makes the point, Richard's not alone. There's a lot of Richards out there. There are probably a lot of them in 401k plans, and they haven't started making contributions. How can we change that and make a difference in life so we have fewer Richards at 60 years old who make comments like, I probably should start saving? Industry challenges, we talk about, we need to improve outcomes, but that's a derivative. That's what causes that? Well, we say education causes that. We need to educate people, but I mean, if you're starting with terms like what is an equity, we've got to have to set our expectations. We've got to lower the bar, but we got to start with engagement. That couple sitting at the table in the cartoon wasn't engaged at all. And how do we get them engaged? But engagement will lead to education, and education will improve outcomes when they make decisions, and we motivate them to make decisions. But the key aspect here is this is all part of the same thing, but engagement's the foundation. If you're in a room doing education, but you haven't got engagement, you're not going to be able to move people forward. If they're not leaning forward when they get into the room and going, what am I going to get out of this, and have something of value? The focus group yesterday, they were really excited to talk about retirement planning, but we told them we were going to keep it simple. And I think advisors struggle with that. It's kind of like a PhD person trying to talk in the kindergarten class about chemistry. It's just really difficult conversation. How do we do that? How do we keep it simple and engage them? Because for these people, they're 85 and they didn't save. And I think it starts with participant meetings that look like this. Nobody's paying attention. What does this have to do with me? How does it affect my daily life? How do we move it forward? And there's a bunch of studies out there showing, people aren't saving. The average balance of a 55 to 64-year-old is almost $200,000. The median $770,000. Meaning there's a lot of people with a lot of money. There's a lot of people with very little money. And if you have 70,000 and you're 60 years old, it's not a good place to be. And Richard probably was in those meetings that didn't engage him. I think there's something that causes this. There's an issue that causes this, that causes the meetings like this. And it's we put a lot of information on the chalkboard, trying to get them to, hey, here's some things you need to know about your 401k plan. And we use words like equity and fixed income. Like they know what we're talking about. I mean, who would have thought you would have to be coming out with definitions for words like that? And if we start putting like a sequence of return and asset allocation and fiduciary, and we're doing all of that, they're important, they're critical. I want to know my advisor knows it, but that isn't what I need to know. One of the advisors that uses us, Jonathan Schulteis from Greensboro, North Carolina, walks into the room and he says, what's the most important part of your retirement plan? And they were well trained by the industry. The participants have been. They say fees, funds, asset allocation, fiduciary. And he says, no, the most important part of your plan is, can I retire? And Jonathan says, before you leave the room today, I'm going to answer that question for each of you. That's the moment that he gets that very critical foundational. People get engaged. Like, I think you're overpromising, but I'm going to start paying attention because nobody's ever answered that for me. They want to know, can I retire? What do I need to do to retire? How do I get there? All the other, all the fancy stuff behind that moves the clock and all the gear. I don't need to know that. I just want to know, can I retire? What do I need to do? And he answers that, and people start leaning forward. Before Jonathan gets to the room, he creates a 1-page gap report from imported census data, and this is for each participant. And you can create these reports really quickly, helping them understand what do you need to do to get to retirement. Now at the top is a very easy to understand, meaningful chart that everybody can go, hey, I get that. Money's going to last me 15 years. And you need to save more. And that helps them go, wow, that's me. But we're going to do something down below, just below that. We're going to show them their current paycheck stub. And this will get close to their take-home pay. And that's the number that, you know, ING years ago said that people had a number and it was like millions of dollars. I think this is the number people connect to. Hey, that's my paycheck stub. How did you do that? If you get close to or match, people start leaning forward and they go, how did you do that? Next, we're going to show, and then they start leaning forward even more. We're going to show them they need to go to 4% to 10.8. That's still abstract. One advisor told me he was on site at a plan sponsor, and he said, yeah, one of the participants asked me, what does it mean to go from 2% to 4%? How does that affect my take-home pay? And the advisor goes, I don't know. Well, that's the question the participants want to get answered. That's what affects their daily life. Okay, how much can I give up per paycheck? And here we're going to show them that it's going to cost them about $170 per paycheck to fund that potential shortfall. Now, I get it. Most people can't walk away from $170. I don't worry about that. We'll address that concern in just a minute. But at least we got them engaged like, oh, wow, I can't afford that. We're going to answer some other questions before we get there. We'll take a look at it a little bit different way. But we're providing them in a 1-page report some really nice ways to look at it. And then we're going to put some other possible solutions like letter A, wait a year before you do anything. And it's going to cost you more a year from now than it will now. Option B, retire a year later. But option C is pretty magic. It's just if you have some outside assets. One of the advisors that uses this is Gerald Burnett. And I met him at a Charlie Epstein marketing show years ago. We were in New Orleans. And Charlie said, go over to him because he advocates for you a lot. So I went over to Gerald. Gerald works for the Raven Financial. They have 800 employees. He's the key person over the 401k plans, runs that division of the company. They have $9.5 billion under management. And I said, tell me a fun story. It's a story I ask advisor after advisor. And he said, well, we just rolled a simple plan into a K plan. Had 21 employees, 11 were contributing. He said, it was a brand new plan to me. I got all 11. He was using this report and something I'll show you in just a moment. I got all 11 to increase their deferrals and electively roll their $1.1 million into the plan. Of the other 10, I got them all to start making deferrals. And I found another $1.5 million outside of the plan. So I started with $2.6 million. And that was just 21 employees. And he'll tell me story after story today. You'll hear his voice in just a little bit because he's using this report and he's finding outside assets. Amazingly simple, 1-page, easy to engage. Now and everybody understands it. You created with imported census data. The objections from the participants is I can't afford the increase. I'll talk about that in a moment. And the second one is we have outside assets. And what do I do with those? And what advisor doesn't want to know about that question? You can include this contribution analysis report that shows baby steps to get them towards a successful retirement. How do we move them forward? If they can't afford the $170, what can they afford? And we're going to show them their paycheck stub and show them, hey, here's where you are today. What does a 1, 2, 3, 4%? You can change these percentages. You can put Roth in here. We can do all, and you can choose which account gets funded, all based on your need and working with that plan sponsor. But right here, we can show a 1% increase in their contributions. And what they care about is how does it affect their take-home pay? So it costs about $25 for this participant for every 1% step up in pay. And you can ask them, what can you afford to do? You can't afford the $170. Can you afford $100? If you give up a couple of your, eating out at lunches a week, and give up the 6-pack of beer once a week. Can we go to up to $100? One of the advisors that uses us works for Gerald is Bassam Malik. And Bassam told me the story. I asked him the same story when I met him. I flew out on site and met Bassam, and they were in the Detroit area, north of Detroit. And I said, Bassam, tell me a fun story. He said, we were just down in Chicago for the 3rd year in a row. He said, we used same set of reports every year. He said, first 2 years we were there, we got just great increase in deferrals. And when we were doing the strategy meeting, we said, we're really happy with where we're at with the plan. After Bassam on the 3rd meeting, they did a significant, he said, we didn't expect a significant increase in deferrals. 3rd year in a row, we got significant increase in deferrals. Why? Because people can take baby steps towards getting successful. They just can't eat the whole elephant at once. So they can step up $50 and $75, maybe $25. But making a small change year over year is better than making a big change and then turning it off right away. So the opportunity to get there, because people will readjust their budget, and they'll start spending things they don't need again, and they can give up the $25, $50, $75, but showing them how to get there. We can also include, if you want, what does this look like in the future at different rates of returns, at different contribution levels? And then what is the balance? What's the cost of waiting? So a 3% increase in deferrals at a 6% rate of return, what kind of balance is it going to be? And then what's the cost of waiting? You wait a year before going to 3%, it's a $16,000 loss in value. So keeping that $75 in your paycheck costs you $16,000 at retirement. Just wanted to let you know. So it's a very engaging, easy way for people to understand what retirement looks like in a way that keeps it simple and just covers the basics. I want you to get to retirement successfully, because if they're not invested in the 401k plan, talking to them about fees don't cost anything if you don't have any 401k plan. It's not engaging. It's important part of the process, absolutely. But sometimes we're talking about the engine without even showing them how to drive the truck. We're focused on, and this is kind of our key success. We were MetLife's top sales tool in their 403b division back in the day, but we're focused on keeping the questions centered about what are they asking, not what's the advisor want to communicate, but let's stay centered on the participant. And can I retire is key to that. Everything else is derivative, and then we get into more complex issues. But if you don't answer the basic questions, the other questions aren't nearly as important. How do we help advisors succeed? Participant engagement. We're going to help you engage participants in a way that a lot of participants have never been engaged. Richard never got engaged when he was young, never started contributing money, and he got to 60. And that's why we see a lot of the statistics that we see today on the world. Improved plan sponsor retention. I'm going to share a video with you, a quote from Gerald, but he has no fear of losing them because he's engaged the employees. The employees actually love it, and he's not worried about somebody coming in saying I have lower fees. I'll share a quote, and I'll kind of save it for Gerald to say, deliver value, bringing value to the table, because it's like if you're going into the room and saying, here's my differentiator. Jane Cadillac walked into a plan sponsor, and she had our report was in the bottom of her briefcase, and she was bringing out her differentiators. And when she brought out our report, the plan sponsor grabbed and said, this is exactly what I want. And she won it based on the ability for her to bring participant education to the room. You own the data in the process. It's not owned by the record keeper. You own it. So you don't have, hey, for Nationwide, I've got to do it this way, and for Transamerica this way. You can come in and have the same speech, the same prep, and help them engage year after year and refine that speech and do a really good job at saying, okay, here's the data that I need to know. And you're independent. You're not tied to it. Record keepers won't promote you. I think I left that slide in the deck because record keepers are often calling your 50 and 60-year-old clients saying, hey, when it comes to retirement, think of us. And record keepers often don't promote advisors on the website, and you increase your AUM. You increase it through the rollovers and the increased deferrals. One advisor used to charge a premium per participant to the plan sponsor for adding services. He said, Ed, it was stupid because I was losing the money down the long term, trying to get a $50 spiff for doing the education. He said, I shouldn't even be doing that. I can get a lot more money just because I'm getting rollovers and increase in deferrals. Here's Gerald Burnett, and he's got this quote. He did my very first podcast. It's I've got a podcast series. I don't push them out regularly, like Shauna kind of hinted at. I push them out when I get great content. And Gerald did my first one. It's the most listened to. And here's a quote from him in the he tells the story of going into a brand new hospital in the podcast, going into a hospital and to a trustee meeting. Fees, there was no advisor before, fees are higher. He walks into the room and he hasn't even presented yet. It's not started. And one of the trustees says to him, Gerald, your fees are too high. I want you to lower them. And Gerald says, hold on a moment. I will take questions and concerns after I present. Keep that thought. Let me do my presentation. And he says we're their key to differentiator. We're the education component that they use. He showed him what he's going to do and talked to him about his services. And when he got done, that same penny pincher trustee said, maybe a little sarcastically, says to Gerald, I want to be sure your fees are high enough. I want you to stick around. So you're not worried about the guy coming in and saying, I'm going to lower your fees. I can reduce that. I can penny pinch. So it's really helping you engage the trustee meeting and understand, hey, I bring a differentiator to the room. Charlie Epstein said this when he introduced me when he was still doing the circuit, and he's earned more money from TRAC. That's our solution, the retirement analysis kit. The last 20 years, any solution I've used, the money you earn, and it's not a sales tool. That's the beauty of it. It's a education tool for the participants. So you get to make a difference in somebody's life. You get to help average blue collar, hardworking Americans retire well. You get a very satisfied plan sponsor, and you get to increase your income. Put it all together and change the way the meetings are done. You get to help the way meetings are done. Record keepers are cutting the line. I wrote this article and I got multiple calls from it for the 401k specialist. Letting record keepers cut in line, because what happened also, if you have any, if you're managing direct clients, they're rolling over to the record keepers when they get to retirement, but you have the opportunity to have a relationship with the participants. And when they're looking for what to do in retirement, you're on the radar. You're not going to always win the account, but at least you're on the radar. You've made a difference in their lives already. I could tell story after story of, Gerald tells them a number of them, a number of advisors. And you go, how successful can this be? And I'll give you one story I heard. I was actually at an Ari show sharing the story, and we were in New Jersey, and Matt Monroe out of Syracuse, New York, tells a story. He said, I mail these reports to their home, which may be the least effective way to use the reports. But he said, I was stunned. They were bringing the reports to the one-on-one meetings at the office. He said, I was stunned. In the second year, they brought 2 reports. They had the prior year's report, and they brought this year's report. And the third year, they had 3 reports with him. He says, I was absolutely stunned. And I was sharing that in New Jersey with Ari show just before COVID hit. And a gentleman in the back of the room put up his hand. I said, yes. He said, I can beat that. He says, I use your solutions. And it was the 4th year in a row, and I brought 4 reports with them. I don't know how much paperwork your 401k participants hold on to, but if they're holding on to 4 years worth of paperwork, you've engaged them in a meaningful way. You're making a difference in their life, and they're headed towards success. So I've heard that over and over from different people, how many years they get to keep the paperwork from. Because it would have made a difference for Richard to have been engaged at a younger time, helping him understand where he is for retirement and starting earlier rather than saying at 60, I should probably start saving. Any questions? What questions are there about the presentation or any of the solution?
I don't see any questions.
Okay. My email's on the we're retireready.com, Retire Ready Solutions, retireready.com, and my email is there. And I will send these slides out to Ari, and he can send them to everybody. Ari, thank you. Great to have this time. Appreciate you allowing me to present.
I hope Richard was able to retire at some point.
I never wanted to go back and visit that question with him. So he's retired. I don't know how it's going. And it's like, as it was, knowing that we can make a difference. I tell my my employees, we're in the poverty alleviation business, and we're helping advisors help people. And it's what drives their passion.
Absolutely. That's a heartbreaking story. And I'm sure he's not the only one that has gone through something like that.
There's lots of them.
Yeah. It's sad.
Thank you, Ed. Next on our list, Joe Caruso, which Joe I've known from way back when. Tell a lot of stories from way back when that probably we shouldn't. But Joe is the insurance guru, the insurance maven. When I'm in trouble with insurance, he's the guy I go to, and we won't mention that problem. Actually, but I did talk to somebody about that recently. But
I also have Tom Schrant with me as well from
yes.
Boston.
Let me share my screen, because let me see.
There he is. Awesome.
Yeah, there we see it. And it always drives me nuts because the slideshow, it affects the slideshow. Okay, here we go.
Well, let's talk about insurance. I mean, I'm sure that's everybody's opportunity here to want to listen about insurance, but it is a necessary evil. So my name is Joe Caruso. I have been in this crazy industry, embarking close on 40 years now. And as Ari said, I've known Ari probably 20 plus years now. So I have mainly worked on the financial institution side, RIAs, BDs, hedge funds, TPAs, record keepers, 316s, 321s, 338s, and a multitude of insurances, as we'll go through that today. Insurance is not something that everybody wants to talk about, but it's clearly something that everybody needs. So it's one of those necessary evils. So I'll let Tom introduce himself.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Tom Schrant. I'm a partner over at Lockton Affinity. We are the national administrator for a Lloyd's of London product designed for small to mid-size RIAs. We currently insure probably 1,200 to 1,500 RIAs across the country. We also work with TPAs, record keepers, 316s, 338s, et cetera. I have a team within Lockton that's completely trained on the advisory space, especially the retirement advisory space, where it gets a little trickier. Worked with Joe for years, have an immense amount of respect for him. And Joe and I work together. Joe represents our product with Lloyd's of London for some of his clients. So I'm happy to be with everybody. Look forward to the discussion.
So moving forward, really talking about what's gone on in the insurance world. I think from the standpoint of the last 16 months has really been a watershed moment when you had Schwab and then Fidelity require the RIAs to carry E&O insurance, to carry cyber, and to carry some component of crime. I do credit the states of Washington and the states of Oklahoma that had protected their constituents already. I don't think many people realize that we had two states that required both broker-dealers and RIAs to carry $1 million worth of E&O insurance. I think when you look at going back to the first PPP back in 2009, we never got to where we should have. Post Bernie Madoff, we never really protected the RIAs. We never protected the plan participants. We never protected certain aspects of the retirement as well as the individual account. And we see every day, you see somebody absconding with some money, whether it be qualified money or non-qualified money. You see somebody coming up with some sort of Ponzi scheme. So the real question comes about as to why did Fidelity and why did Schwab mandate these requirements. And I can tell you, it wasn't the goodness out of their hearts or to push down a lot of, it was because they were paying claims. You had advisors who were getting hacked or who were getting compromised on their web portals. And the custodian had to pay out and write checks to those advisors who were getting hacked. And they got to a point and they said, you know what, we need to push this down to the advisor and to the RIA level. And you saw last October, Schwab mandating $1 million in aggregate of E&O insurance, crime or cyber, excuse me, and then a component of crime coverage. And really the genesis, as I said, is really because it's the cyber that was the driver. You had people getting hacked. You had issues popping up where an advisor portal was, you had full discretion and they were able to transfer those assets that that advisor was overseeing. And the custodian, whether it be Schwab or Fidelity, had to indemnify those thefts. And it really was a watershed moment. And I say that from the standpoint of the regulators, when you look at FINRA or the SEC, had never even thought about mandating these types of insurances at all. And it's, I credit Schwab and I credit Fidelity. They really have pushed the market where the regulators clearly should have done this years ago. So let's look at understanding E&O insurance and the types of policies. You have a single limit policy, and then you have an aggregate policy limit. I think Ari's jumping around on me. So
Yeah,
an aggregate,
I need instructions.
an aggregate pooled limit is just that. So you've got one single limit, and what the carriers do is they sell 1,000 policies or 2,000 policies or 3,000 policies. But that limit might have a $10 million, $15 million limit. And like I said, they're selling a multiple 1,000 policies off of that. What happens if prior to you having a claim or having need the ad insurance, you better hope that that pool hasn't dried up. But people might say, well, I've got paper, I've got the policy. You've got no coverage. That pool is dried up for the year and that's it. Big issue that we used to see within the E&O insurance. If you think about that, there's no other policy that you buy from an aggregate pooled limit. Why did they do that? Well, they did that from the standpoint of hitting a price point that was clearly an appetite that somebody said, well, for $200, $300, $400, I got some coverage. You got some coverage. You don't know if it's the coverage going to be there when you need it. But I got that policy, and that policy says I got a policy. Yeah, but you got no more coverage. There have been, the $10 million pool was, drawn down with a couple other claims, and sorry, but there's no more coverage.
Yeah, just to chime in, Joe, at Lockton, we have a policy really, or we try to follow a policy not to place for any of our program type business group master policies for all the reasons that you just laid out. Really for our E&O, right? As an insurance broker or, an MGA, if we sell some advisor a policy and that aggregate limit is eroded through no harm of his or hers, leaves the broker, leaves the carrier in a really bad spot. So, and especially in the RIA world, with a simple Google, you can find them online.
Oh,
They're
absolutely.
very shiny and not expensive and look great, but the devil's in the detail, and the detail comes when you have a claim. So definitely something to keep your eye on in our industry as far as group policies. Good point,
Well,
Joe.
Tom, you just hit the hammer on the nail. You're buying that policy on some sort of web click and bind. There isn't anybody who is consulting you on what you need or what coverages, the coverage limits that you need or the coverage types that you need. So from a standpoint of Did somebody educate you? No, you didn't. You went to a website, you filled out something, you put your credit card in, and guess what I got? I got a policy. You got a policy. You're right. You don't have any coverage when you need it, or you may not have any coverage when you need it, but you got a policy, and you got a policy at a couple $100. You know, that's the way we buy car insurance today. That's the way we buy homeowners insurance today. I think when you ask most people if they have a claim, what happens? Well, the phone rings. You know, I think you see some of the natural disasters and you hear the horror stories. So I'm not going to try to tell you that those policies don't exist. They do. The single limit policies where you have full blown policy availing coverage to yourself for the term of the policy is clearly one way to move. And I think from the standpoint of buying the appropriate coverage and coverage that for the investments that you are representing in today's environment, maybe crypto may not be covered and maybe an exclusion, private placements, alternative investments. Well, those may not be covered under your policy. So the devil clearly is in the details, just the way that we see the devil's in the details on a retirement plan. You know, knowing that you've got the proper coverage for a 316, a 321, a 338, if you're acting in those capacities. Well, hold on. Well, I've got an E&O policy. Yeah, but those scope of services are not covered within your E&O policy. So guess what? Claim denied. I'm sure that has happened. And I know it's happened many times to a lot of people who call me up and say, I thought I had coverage. My broker never told me that, or I bought a policy online. Those are things that clearly, as you walk through the risk and understanding that what you're doing today is one thing, but what you might do tomorrow, what services that you might add to attract a client or win a client. The scope of services that you're handling today might be in your policy, but as you expand services and as you expand those for clients, they may not be covered. I've seen ERISA exclusions generally on years ago on most RIA policies. They didn't cover ERISA. So you're acting as a 338. You didn't have any coverage. So.
Yeah, our program specific with regards to ERISA and the retirement advisors, we get very specific within our form. We have an affirmative ERISA fiduciary endorsement where we expand on the definition of professional services to encompass that service, to Joe's point, to make sure that you're covered for what you do. You know, and that's another good point that you made, Joe, as far as if your practice changes and the types of services that you're providing, having that broker, having that expert broker, hopefully, you know, to have that conversation. Is it covered? Hey, we're getting into some private placements. You know, does that have coverage? Do I have coverage on my form? Yes or no? Are conversations that you need to have, you know, so.
And then speaking about cyber, clearly cyber has been been a moving target. I mean, we used to talk about hacks as the main component. Then we talked about data breaches, and now we're into ransomwares and ransom. So what's the next evolution of cyber? What's the next evolution? And those are components and features or endorsements that clearly are covered within a cyber coverage. One of the requirements that Schwab and Fidelity put in there is social engineering, meaning if somebody is able to hack into into your system and move money without, that's not you doing it, is it covered? That social engineering feature is clearly an endorsement that they require as a requirement that both of those platforms put in place.
Yeah, I really applaud the custodians for putting those requirements out because it is, you know, from an investment professional insurance buying perspective, it's confusing, right? So the requirements are you have to have E&O insurance at $1 million. You have to have social engineering, air quotes, and you have to have some coverage for employee theft or hacker theft. Well, that's in the insurance world, not one policy, right? That's a mixture of a few. So carriers are handling it and approaching it differently. We have our approach, Hartford has their approach, et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, getting it right is critical. And, you know, the digital world that we all live in, fortunately or unfortunately, I mean, it's a blend between a cyber and theft exposure and an E&O services that you're providing. So make sure that whatever coverage that you are buying, you know, definitely covers that. And certainly if you rely on broker dealer coverage is a point I wanted to make, be extremely curious as far as what social engineering coverage you have or don't have if you're not custodying with your specific, you know, broker dealers RIA. If in case we handle LPL's insurance and master policy, and my team fields calls daily on, do I have it here? Do I not have it here? And it really depends. There's not one clean answer. It depends on where the money's custody. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is that just like a plan sponsor in the retirement world, it's a cost of doing business hiring a fiduciary consultant these days to help them along the process. I'd say, you know, picking your E&O and cyber liability broker as an investment professional is very critical, and definitely, you know, the cost of doing business as well.
The last piece that Schwab and Fidelity required was crime insurance, theft insurance. And this is really from an employee theft and things of that nature. One of the things that I credit Broadridge Matrix years ago with their TPAs and their record keepers was that they required those service providers to carry $1 million worth of crime insurance. If you're a TPA or a record keeper and you're not a producing entity, one of the things that I recommended and have always recommended to those clients that we represent is an extension, not only of first party, but third party, from the standpoint of you're working with somebody who's not your employee. I don't know how well you know these individuals. Is this a new relationship? You know, from a standpoint of we're talking about 401k dollars, you know, and as I always say, you never know when somebody's back is against the wall where they will abscond with something or take it from. And people always think, well, you know, it's just 401k money. If I borrow it for a couple of days, no one's going to know. Well, yes, they will. We saw somebody down in Texas who clearly was a service provider and was not very honest in the retirement space. So, you know, I think when you look at crime and the component that Schwab and Fidelity, as Tom mentioned, it's an aggregate $1 million. One of the things we recommend clearly is, depending upon the size of an RIA, it's the size of the AUM under advisement, is clearly a policy for E&O and a separate policy for cyber, and realizing that you can sublimit, some of these carriers do sublimit out cyber as a component of one policy, but once again, you're eroding the value or the coverage you have available. So from that standpoint, with the crime component, you know, it's people always say, oh, I know my staff, I know my employees, until something happens, until you realize money is missing. And one thing about these crime policies is not only do they cover the plan assets, but they also cover your own corporate assets as well. So from that standpoint, you know, not all policies look and feel the same. You know, it's how you acquire it, when you acquire it. You know, this is not a one half-hour conversation with an insurance broker, but it's an ongoing relationship, because as your business changes, your policy needs to change. It needs to get maybe a little more robust in certain areas. We're talking about types of investments, types of vehicles. One of the big things clearly right now is within the retirement space is crypto. You know, is it covered? Is it not covered under my policies? You know, how is it covered? So those are things that you clearly we need to address and need to open up that conversation openly. So.
Yeah, and as a plan advisor, I'd say, you know, for our program, we probably have 12 open social engineering claims going on right now. So like this definitely is happening, and obviously it's happening because of the requirements, like we talked about in the beginning of the talk. So, but the point I'd like to make is, a plan advisor, you have a huge bullseye on your back from these fraudsters, right? What comes with 401k plans? Big balances. So they're licking their chops to get to your system, to dupe somebody, to get in and you know, infiltrate you know, some private information that they can, you know, fraudulently you know, steal.
I always tell most clients, especially on the RIA side, it's not if you get hacked, it's when you're going to get hacked, because you're going to get hacked. You're going to open up an email. Someone's going to send you something. You're going to get infiltrated. And the question is, at that point, how and when, and all of the legal issues start ticking forward. When do you have to disclose? How do you disclose? What information got hacked? You know, if you're a plan sponsor, you know, a cyber breach can also open up a fiduciary claim. You know, when you look at fiduciary liability and the plan fiduciary, the responsibilities, as Tom mentioned, you've got a target on your back. You get a cyber breach, ooh, you know, you got a big target on your back. So from that standpoint, fiduciary claims can come from cyber exposures. And that's clearly a new avenue that a lot of people aren't realizing. So, and with that, I always say to clients, if you have a crime policy or you have a cyber policy, which one comes first? You know, a lot of people don't realize this. Which policy would step in first? And the answer is the crime policy would. Secondary policy clearly on that would be a cyber. So the importance of having the proper coverage and having the proper amount of coverage is important. So when you look at retirement plans, what plans do you need? Okay, there's only one requirement plan that you have out there, and we all know that's the ERISA bond. You know, as I always say, it's probably a policy that a lot of people overlook. A lot of times, a lot of people don't take that out to market and make that, you know, and put that bid out there. It's just more of a commodity. And those are things that clearly we can help with that as well. So as you look to some of these MEPs and PEPs and things of that nature, those requirements are still there. Directors and officers, cyber coverage and things of that nature are all components that every corporation should have. But the most important, I always tell people, is you have a retirement plan, you have a benefits plan, you should have a plan level fiduciary coverage. When you look at the average 401k balance, or I shouldn't say the average, the small to medium sized organizations, that $10 million plan and under, they're floating without a net. There's no coverage for out there. And they may say, oh, the 316 or the 338 or the 321. So the record keeper, the plan advisor, or the TPA has my back. Well, that's a lot of times that's not necessarily true. The plan sponsor has the duty to defend themselves, because they're going to get named in an action. And it's going to be, well, I thought you were my fiduciary. What does the DOL says? The DOL says the ultimate fiduciary is the plan sponsor. So you're going to get named in that suit, and you're not going to have a net to live under. You're not going to have the ability to go out and hire counsel and have somebody pay for that. You're going to have to pay for that yourself. Open up that corporate checkbook and start writing, you know.
Yeah, it's a great point, Joe. I mean, you know, you could hire an outside, you know, professional as a plan sponsor, hire an outside professional, and that definitely insulates you, you know, to a point. But the fiduciary claim might be, why'd you hire that one?
Yeah.
Wait, their fees are this, and we could have got them here. Excessive fees are it's a fiduciary exposure, but I have examples where we were on a risk where we wrote the fiduciary insurance for the plan sponsor, $6 million claim. And then we also wrote the E&O for the retirement advisor, both of their policies ended up splitting 3 million to pay the settlement of $6 million over an excessive fee cookie cutter claim that was bogus. But precedent in the legal systems are happening, and these attorneys are marketing for plan sponsors to do these excessive fee claims. So there is no insulation, unfortunately. I guess the only insulation would be insurance. That might be a biased comment, coming from an insurance broker, but you guys understand risk. You're hired, for your expertise and for a reason, because it's complicated, it's complex, it's confusing. So just make sure that you get the right coverage to back yourself up, would be my closing comment.
Absolutely. I think there's an attorney out in Denver, Frank Azar. Every time I go out to Denver, I hear Frank Azar on the radio, and I might just so insurance does matter, coverage does matter. So thank you for your time. I think we are right at a half hour. So
yeah. Joe, I appreciate you bailing
no problem.
bailing clients out of trouble here and there.
Well, and as everybody, all the presenters and all the organizations have a passion for what they do. We have a passion for what we do. We understand coverage. We understand this is a necessary evil. And in all honesty, no one really likes buying insurance. Okay. So thank you, Ari. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. So last but not least, got my presentation. Before we do that, again, we will be in Oakland, California for some reason or another. We're doing a conference there on April the 14th. Try to get the A's in before they move to Vegas, and San Francisco was just way too pricey to ever hold an event over there. And then we'll be in Detroit, Motor City, May the 3rd, and then trying to book an event for New York City in June, as well as some other wild cards. One of our former guests who helped us with one event is trying to help us with another city. So we'll find out about that. And then we'll have an event obviously in September. But let me share my screen. Last but not least, play from the start. So Secure 2.0, as I call it, Electric Boogaloo. There is obviously a reason I call it that. And for the first time in my memory, we actually have a retirement plan law that has its own number sequel. And of course, in my opinion, when it comes to movies, most sequels aren't very, very good. I think, I think what makes a really bad sequel is if they're just a retreat of the original. Caddyshack 2, I think, pops up. Airplane 2 is kind of a retreat of Airplane 1, but it's a little bit different because it's on the lunar shuttle. The Zucker brothers and Jim Abrams had nothing to do with the second movie. The great ones are few and far between. Standing out is obviously The Godfather Part 2, Terminator 2, Star Trek 2, and of course the Star Wars movies and whatnot, and James Bond and all that stuff. But Secure 2.0 has a lot of stuff out here and a lot to unpack. I'll go through really the basics, and then obviously the slides will, go into further detail. New 401k plans and 403b plans, those that are started in 2023, or the effective date of the enactment of it, Secure, which I guess for the 5 people that started the plan on December 28th or 29th, they'll be in there. But starting in 2025, these plans are going to have to put automatic enrollment in place. 3 to 10, and then auto escalation up to a maximum of somewhere between 10 and 15. Some plans are going to be exempt, including existing plans, governmental plans, church plans, and more importantly, small employers with 10 or fewer employees, and obviously new employers. But we've been pushing for that. We've been pushing for automatic enrollment ever since the implementation of the Pension Protection Act 2006. This is no surprise. This is the way we've always been headed. And, it's something out there, obviously, to push the employers on. Increased startup credit. Secure 2.0 increases the small business startup credit for employers with up to 50 employees from 50% to 100%, creates a new credit for plans other than DB plans That is based on the amount of money contributed to participant accounts. I think a lot of plan providers don't really push out that increased startup credit. The picture there is from the Sting 2, which I've never seen. I've seen the original Sting. I don't know how you replace Robert Redford and Paul Newman with Jackie Gleason and Mac Davis, but they did do that. Section 1.03 and section 1.04, again, talking about the Savers credit. That's dealing with participant credit. It's no longer going to be a credit. It's going to be basically a match contribution from the government. 50% of retirement contributions up to $2,000 per individual, subject to obviously phasing out once certain people make certain income levels. I think that is going to be a really big deal. It's going to start, for quite some time, not for quite some time, until the Department of Labor and the Department of Treasury figure out how they're going to accomplish that by depositing money in a participant's 401k account. PEP changes. PEPs may designate any named fiduciary other than a plan employer to collect contributions to the plan. That fiduciary must create written collection procedures. It's effective beginning now. Another really bad sequel, Beyond the Poseidon Adventure. Poseidon Adventure to me is the greatest disaster movie of all time. Beyond the Poseidon Adventure, 7 years later, because Irwin Allen was not making any more movies, not making any more money after disaster movies. He worked with Michael Caine on The Swarm, which please don't watch. It was really bad. So for some reason, Michael Caine was indebted to Irwin Allen. They did Beyond the Poseidon Adventure. Terrible, terrible movie. Not terrible, but 403B MEPs and PEPs, we finally have that in place. Many years ago, I had a client. I've talked about this client a lot. TPA business. He was going to make a mint, pushing out MEPs, and he had worse. He had worse ADHD than I do. He never got around to pushing those MEPs out because the Department of Labor came out with that advisory opinion, thanks to our friends at TAG. And he did at one point pay a lot of money to a very well-known ERISA attorney to come out with an opinion on whether we could have 403B MEPs. And to me, it was always a toss-up because the code didn't say you could, and the code didn't say that you can't. But now that the code will say that 403B MEPs will be a thing, they'll get relief from the one bad apple rule. It'll come into play in 2023. I assume that it's only going to be for ERISA 403B plans, but they're a mess. They're not as big as mess as non-ERISA 403B plans, but it's certainly a positive for those in the PEP business and for advisors who just want to have a solution for their 403B clients. The RMD age increased to 73 for 2023, 75 in 2033. People are living longer. I remember back in the day when people living to their 70s, that was life expectancy, and people are living well into their 80s and 90s. Even people who don't even take care of themselves are finding out living to their late 80s. Remember, 5% non-5% owners only have to take out the RMDs after actual retirement, even past RMD age. That's a qualified plan rule. So the RMD age for IRAs is going to increase, but of course, remember, in the qualified plan space, a non-5% employee, non-5% owner employee doesn't have to start taking out RMDs until they actually retired. Top Gun Maverick, that's a great sequel. I think it's better than the first one. And it's funny, people laugh at me, but I only watched the first Top Gun about a month or two before the last Top Gun movie came out. 1.09 catch-up contributions. They increased the limits for catch-up under retirement age for individuals aged 60 to 63 to whichever is greater, 10% or 150% of the regular catch-up amount for 2024. Because we don't know what that will be in 2024. We have higher inflation, we'll have a higher catch-up limit. These amounts obviously will be adjusted annually based on the cost of living. And as we know, with high inflation, with these limits, it's going to be higher and higher. So for that age 60 catch-up, that's going to start in 2025. Bad News Bears going to Japan awful sequel. Breaking Training was a really good movie. Let Them Play, the Houston Astrodome, whatnot. A lot of the kids didn't come back for the third movie, and Tony Curtis isn't exactly Walter Matthau or William Devane. Section 1.10, student loan matching contributions. We had that IRS advice that says, yeah, you can use matching to pay off student loans. Well, now it's part of the code. And that's going to take, that's effective for, years after 12/31/2023. I know there are quite a few companies that came out offering it. I don't know how popular that's going to be. I've always been under the belief that plan sponsors will do as little as possible, and that they will not offer this, but we'll see what happens. I just have a negative view of employers because I was an employee once too, as I always say, a malcontent. Section 1.13, financial incentives allowed. Employers can offer now de minimis financial incentives, such as a small gift card to encourage employee participation in the retirement plan. You can't use plan assets to pay for the financial incentives. Now, this ran, we have, people don't realize this, we have a contingent benefit rule that with a 401k plan, or really any outside of matching contributions, we cannot have benefits contingent on participants deferring or not deferring in a 401k plan. So this will be an exception. I've always said to advisors, hey, have a gift card for attending a participation meeting, enrollment meeting, whatnot. And, now a plan sponsor could do something. Maybe they'll give a $25 gift card to Costco, or $25 gift card to Starbucks, so they could buy 2 or 3 coffees. Or I don't even know what the price of coffee is nowadays at Starbucks, but it's something, and anything to push people to participate in a 401k plan, that's great. Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan, great sequel, probably because Star Trek the motion picture had those awful uniforms, the incessant special effects, the wormhole. It was just, and V'ger had to be one with the creator. Great sequel. Section 1.15, emergency withdrawals are allowed. Participants can withdraw up to $1,000 a year from their retirement plan for certain emergencies without paying the 10% early withdrawal tax. They can put the money back into their account within 3 years. They can't take another emergency withdrawal during that 3-year period unless the money is first paid back. So they get a break on the $1,000. And I'm sure people are going to say, whoopee, the medical expenses are more than $1,000. That sort of deal. A dental appointment or a medical, issue certainly costs more than $1,000. But look, it's $100 back in avoiding in an early withdrawal tax, and it gives the opportunity for participants to pay money back, which we never had before. And listen, it's something. And if you've known anything about the retirement plan business and retirement plan law, we always start with something little and then we build upon it. Just look at automatic enrollment. Auto portability, they're going to make it easier for retirement plan service providers to transfer amounts in a default IRA. It's going to be 12 months after the Secure 2.0 enactment. That's just been a big policy where, they're just going to move the money around. The Department of Labor has always been striving for auto portability. How that's going to work out, I don't know. I don't really think that that's such a big deal because, in my opinion, most participants who leave have bigger account balances and usually take the money and take the account with them to an IRA or to their next employer. Changes to the long-time part-time inclusion. Secure 1.0 had the preface that long-term part-time employees would be able to participate in a 401k plan on the deferral component as long as they have 500 hours or more service within 3 consecutive years. They needed to complete 3 years of service. So what's interesting about that is 2024 is the first year where we will have those long-term part-time employees being eligible. And Secure 2.0 is already decreased that 3 years to 2 years. So in 2025, that long-term part-time inclusion is going to go from 3 years to 2 years. And quite honestly, I see a day where you will have immediate eligibility for 401k plans. Don't know if that's going to happen 5 years down the line or 10 years down the line, but I think that that is going to happen one day. Retirement emergency accounts. Employers may offer non-highly compensated employees emergency savings accounts within a retirement plan. Employers can, have automatic enrollments, and contributions attributable to employees must be capped at no more than 2,500. They're going to be treated like Roth, treated as elective deferrals for purposes of matching. So basically, it's an opportunity for people to, kind of like a vacation club within a 401k plan, more like an emergency club within a 401k plan. I don't know many employers that are going to offer it. Probably, obviously, the bigger employers will. It's just, we'll see how that comes into play. It's like again, this could be like something like the sidecar IRA. I don't know if people remember that, but quite a few years ago, they added to the code where somebody could make IRA contributions within their 401k plan. Now, I've never met a participant been able to do that. Never met an employer that allowed it, but it's there. Section 1.28. CITs are going to be allowed in 403B plans. That's just a big deal for people who promote CITs. I never understood why there was a rule against it, but the rule has been lifted. And of course, to me, the greatest sequel of all time, Godfather Part 2, and we can debate which is better, Godfather 1 or 2. For many years, I thought it was 2. Now I've been going back to 1. It's certainly not 3. Section 3 of the Secure 2.0, simplifying things. Plan fiduciaries can have the opportunity of not recouping overpayments to plan participants. This happens a lot in the DB world, but it does happen sometimes in the 401k space where they, pay people more than they're owed. And there are limits dealing with overpayments so that participants that remain in the plan aren't hurt. And of course, speaking of great sequels, we got Terminator 2. Speaking of bad sequels, we got Terminator, was it Terminator Genesis? Oh, I forgot. It wasn't Dark Fate. It was the one where they have the young Sarah Connor played by Emilia Clarke. I think that was Terminator Genesis. That was a bad sequel. Section 3 continued, 3.02. They're going to reduce the penalty for failure to take the RMD, going from 50 to 25. I always thought that was punitive, the 50%, especially when it's a lot of times the fault of the employer or the fault of the custodian. Sometimes it's the fault of the participant, a lot of times, especially if it's the IRA space. If the correction is made within 2 years, the tax is going to be further reduced to 10%. So it's effective now. Section 303, DOL is going to have a lost and found database by 2025 that are going to allow individuals with money in retirement plan to search for the contact information of plan administrators. Rather than use that whole Social Security system, which has outdated information, there's going to be a database, kind of like in New York State, we have the state controller. I think other states, you might have a state treasurer, lost accounts. Obviously, the problem is TPAs are going to have another job to do because they're going to have to inform the DOL as to missing account balances and whatnot. So there'll be this nice giant database. 304, the involuntary cash out rule. One of my favorite rules that most plan sponsors don't utilize. It's going to increase to $7,000. Thank you, inflation. It's we haven't updated that since. Did we not update that since the Taxpayer Relief Act of 1997? I think we did. I think that's when it was 35 to 5. So we haven't updated in 25 years. It's going to be changing in 2024 and beyond. Section 305, updated EPCRS. Secure 2.0, the IRS wants to be out of the EPCRS voluntary compliance program system. Why do we think that? Because they're pushing more and more errors to be self-corrected. And really obviously going to come down on plan sponsors that they discover on audit that didn't self-correct errors. Section 310, there's going to be a separate top-heavy test for the excludable employees allowed. So for that 21-and-1 rule, they can perform the required top-heavy test separately on the non-excludable and excludable employees. That's going to take place in 2024. Section 311, there's going to be a repayment period for retirement plan distributions taken for qualified birth or adoption expenses. That's a nice deal. Employees are permitted to self-certify hardship in some circumstances. That's the way they've been pushing it. I still have a financial advisor that still sends me hardship requests from plan participants, and I don't trust employees, but let them certify that they're eligible for a hardship, and as long as the plan sponsor doesn't know about it, that's fine. Section 314, distributions allowed for domestic abuse victims. Retirement plans can allow an individual who's experienced domestic abuse to withdraw money from their account, lesser of 10 grand or 50% of the participant's account. They can repay the amounts in 3 years, and if they do so, their income taxes will be refunded. So that is going to be applicable in 2024. Section 316, discretionary amendments. This comes into play. Secure 1.0 allowed plan sponsors to sign plan documents by the tax due date for the tax year it covered. What did that mean? That meant we no longer had that mad rush that I used to when December 31st, every Tom, Dick, Harry, and Margaret wanted to have a defined benefit, and we had to have them sign the plan on 12/31. Secure 1.0 said we don't have to do that. We could wait until the tax due date, including extensions, and that was great. And now this allows some discretionary amendments that increase participants' benefit. We only have to get that into place by the tax due date as well. I think that's great. RMD requirement removed for Roth accounts. Never knew why they had that. These are after-tax accounts. Government can't touch your money for taxes, so I don't know why they allowed that, but Secure 2.0 got rid of that. Section 326, we're going to have an exception to the early distribution penalty for distributions to participants with terminal illness. Somebody who has less than 7 years to go, they can get a distribution that is free from the 10% penalty that you usually get for an early distribution. Section 327, surviving spouses may elect to be treated as the employees for purposes of minimum required distributions. 331, effective individuals can receive up to 22 grand in distributions if they're in a federally declared disaster area. They won't get the 10% early withdrawal tax, and it may be repaid. The amount of tax is over a 3-year period, and employers may allow larger loans and larger payback times for effective individuals. That's for disasters occurring on or after January 26, 2021. I think that's a great deal, being a survivor of Hurricane Sandy, where the area that I'm talking to you from had about 5 feet of water. Section 332, simple IRA exclusive plan rule change. That annoyed so many advisors and so many third-party administrators. We have that simple IRA exclusive plan rule, but starting in 2024, if the plan sponsor is going to replace a simple IRA with a simple 401k or another 401k plan that requires mandatory employer contributions, we're no longer going to have that exclusive simple rule where we can only put a plan in place the following plan year. Distributions will be allowed to pay for long-term care contracts, and retirement plans may allow it. $2,500 to pay for high-quality long-term care insurance premiums, and they're exempt from the 10% early withdrawal tax. And this will be effective 3 years later. So that's going to be sometime in December 2025. So for every tax law where people are going to get a benefit, there's certain ways that the government wants money back. So we lose something in the translation. There are revenue provisions, and Section 6 of Secure 2.0 takes care of that. So HCEs, starting in 2024, if they want to do catch-up contributions, it's all going to have to be Roth. So my wife, who is a attorney in New York City, and she would be an HCE, her catch-up contributions starting next year can only be made on a Roth basis. I don't know about you, but somebody making, a little bit above that HCE limit who lives in New York, lives in California, Massachusetts, Michigan, high tax states, this might hurt them, and they might or might not have to cut back on catch-up contributions. Section 604, this is something I will debate with people till the end of time. Employer contributions allowed on a Roth basis. Sorry, something fell off my desk. Effective contributions made after Secure 2.0's enactment. Employers can allow matching or profit-sharing contributions made to employees to be made on a Roth basis. And I say, good luck. Why do I say good luck? First of all, how many employees do you know who have the money to pay the taxes up front on a match and profit sharing? Two, most importantly, the requirements are that if a person gets a contribution and makes it on a Roth basis, which means they'll have to pay the taxes up front, that means they would be automatically vested at 100%. So say, for example, my wife, who started at a firm where they have a matching contribution of a 10% match on a 6-year vesting schedule. Do you think her employer, remember, it's a law firm full of stuffy law firm partners, do you really believe that they will allow my wife to get her match tax-free and fully vested if she pays the taxes up front? No. Most associates, most attorneys leave within a 6-year period, and they would lose that forfeiture. So I don't believe many employers would allow that provision whatsoever. Amendments. I need shekels. I need money. So plans have until the last day of the plan year beginning on or after January 1, 2025 to adopt amendments made pursuant to Secure 2.0 as long as the plan operates in compliance with the requirements of Secure 2.0. So we're going to come after you with a tack on amendment. So, an ERISA attorney or the TPA says, we got to charge you for an amendment. I'm telling you up front, it's going to happen. And of course, I think the restatement, if we're talking about a 6-year deadline, the next restatement will be 2028. So us ERISA attorneys will hit you for the tack on amendment, and we'll hit you again for the restatement. Plan amendment, the deadlines for Secure 1.0, the 2019 Act, the CARES Act, and the Tax Certainty Disaster Relief Act of 2020 will be updated to that 2025 date as well. So we pushed those back. I actually did a handful of plans. They wanted that Secure and CARES Act amendments in place. I thought the requirements were going to be now. And then, of course, after I did it for the client and charge them, the IRS bumped it back to 2025. Coming soon, again, we will be in Oakland, California. People tell me don't go, but I will be going there. See the Oakland A's. They'll play the Mets that day. We'll have tickets for that available. Getting a guest soon. Go to that401ksite.com to sign up that. And Detroit, Michigan, we will be there on a Wednesday, May the 3rd. Also, we will see the Tigers play the Mets. And for that scheduling, you can thank my 17-year-old son who planned it all out. Unfortunately for him, we don't have any good dates and good conferences for the Mets for the rest of the year. It doesn't work out the schedule because we did most of these stadiums by now. And again, go to that401ksite.com to sign up. $100 gets you 5 hours of content, lunch, stadium tour, a meet and greet with a baseball great. A lot of fun. A lot more fun than virtual events. in my opinion, but of course, virtual events don't do a lot of traveling. And in my opinion, Caddyshack 2 is the worst sequel ever. Again, what's a bad sequel? Something that's just a retread. It's just Caddyshack with Jackie Mason in place of Rodney Dangerfield. And I love Jackie, but he was no Rodney Dangerfield. And there was no Bill Murray, whatnot. And Robert Stack wasn't exactly Ted Knight. Any questions? I believe we have one. Any thoughts on the tax treatment emergency funds that are being paid back within 3 years? Do you pay the tax in 1 year and then get credit or anything back? Or I believe it was spread out. But I don't think that is really going to be a popular feature. I just don't see, again, I work more in the small to medium size plan area space. And quite honestly, I don't see a lot of plan sponsors offering it. And if they do offer it, a lot of people, when they have emergency funds, they just unfortunately don't have the opportunity to put the money back. Listen, I survived Hurricane Sandy. I have to dip into retirement savings. Within 3 years, I wasn't able to pay it back as well if I had that opportunity. So we'll see what happens. And again, Secure 2.0, yeah, it's a sequel. A lot of new stuff in there, a lot to unpack. Nothing earth-shattering, but there's a whole lot in there. I think within the next week, I'll be running an article on how that affects plan providers and what provisions will work out and what provisions are just not going to work out. And again, I think that Roth after-tax employer contribution thing is just not going to fly. That's just my 2 cents. So if there are any other questions, we're going to bid you an adieu for day 1 of that 401k National Virtual Conference. We will be back tomorrow at 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we're going to start with a retirement roundtable. I'll serve as the Bill Maher of the roundtable, talking about, instead of just doing a presentation, we're going to talk an hour with a bunch of the presenters here and other retirement plan professionals as to the topics of the day. It'll get opinionated. It'll get funny. At least I'll try to be funny. And that's really it. So glad you guys were able to be here on day 1. And see you back on day 2 in just a few hours. Take care.